Internet, and welcome to my latest Dreams stream. See what I did there? It rhymes, which is very quite clever. As you may have heard, Dreams, the exciting game creation toolkit sort of thing from Media Molecule, it released just about a week ago on the 14th. Coming out of early access. It's been in early access for a while. And so it's sort of taking the internet by a mild storm, you know. I feel like Dreams maybe is not as wildly successful as in its early days, at least, as some people had hoped it would be. But Dreams, as it was in early access, continues to be, as they say, cool as shit. So for those who don't know, Dreams, it's a PS4 game, so to speak. That is to say, oh no, my battery's low. That is to say, it shows up as a game on your PS4 system. But really, Dreams is much more a toolkit for creating games, and it's meant to have a intuitive interface for making your own games, any type of game. I think the toolkit certainly favors certain types of games over others. It's definitely a lot easier to make, say, 3D platformers or like first-person shooters, that sort of thing, than other types of games. But really, you know, it's Turing complete. Like, if we pop into the editor real quick, like, you start a new scene in Dreams, and you just have this completely blank slate, and it's just like, okay, go to town, make whatever you want to make. And people have certainly done that. People all throughout the early access have been like learning this toolset. I think that's what I was trying to say. They've been learning the toolset, making all sorts of crazy things. And you know, back when Dreams first released into early access, I did a stream where I tried to make just sort of a basic like shoot 'em up game in Dreams, and I figured, you know, I'm an experienced programmer, people pay me money to write software, and like I have some light experience with game engines. Dreams should be a breeze, and good lord, it wasn't. Like, making that, even just that basic game, I can show you the end result from that stream. It was this, the Manaphy game. As you can see, the end result was kind of garbage, and even then, it still took freaking forever to put this thing together. And so, I kind of didn't really touch Dreams much at all during the early access past making this. Like, I made a few handful of things, like lag cubes, which is maybe my favorite creation of all time. It just spawns a bunch of cubes until the PS4 gets very upset with you. And just like as an experiment to see like what it would be like making something that runs on a grid, because Dreams doesn't really work so much on a grid system. It's not really designed with grids in mind. But I made this thing, which is just like a random walk sort of thing. So you have this like playhead that's like moving around in a random direction, and it places blocks behind it, and then of course it is still in 3D, so like everything's slowly moving towards the camera, and it's kind of cool to just sit here and watch this thing for a while. But I didn't really make much else in Dreams during the early access. But with the full version of Dreams coming out, and you know it's in the gaming zeitgeist again, I figured, you know, maybe I should make something in Dreams, and maybe like I should do a stream where I make something in Dreams. But then I thought back to that other stream where I spent just like hours trying to put this thing together, and like that was fun and all, but it's not the most pleasant or entertaining thing, I don't think, necessarily, because you know, it's a lot like programming. There's just lots of times where you're just sitting there staring at a canvas for like 10 minutes, and you're like, I have no idea how to put these two pieces together to make what I want. So instead of trying to make a game on stream, I figured instead what I would do is I would sit down, I would actually, you know, just fiddle with the toolkit at my own pace, on my own time, and make something, make something like actually decent, I think. And then I could do a stream or a video where I show that off. I show off what I made, and I show off, you know, how it's put together, and like talk about the process of making it together, because I think that's what a lot of people are curious about with Dreams, is like you see all these amazing things that people have made, like, oh, this person made Mario 64, this person made PT, that sort of thing, but you're like, I have no idea how that person made that. And actually that's one of my big issues with Dreams is so like you can go into the dream surfing thing, and like you can see all these like amazing things people have made, and like you can see all the different dreams and scenes. You have dreams that are made of scenes, and you know, it has all these great tools for collaboration as well, so you can like download other people's dreams and modify them and share them, and you can like take elements from different dreams and it'll automatically credit all the people who made them. But I think the number one flaw in Dreams is that when you publish a dream or a scene, by default, unless you explicitly change the setting, by default it'll be marked as playable but not remixable. So I can certainly go in and like play this person's game or whatever this thing is. This might just be a video. Oh yeah, this is a game of some sort. But if I wanted to, like, even if I didn't want to edit it, if I just wanted to like piece it apart, like take it apart, look at how they constructed it, and see all their logic, all their animations, all that stuff, there's no way to do that unless they explicitly mark it as remixable. And a lot of people have aversions to, well, first because it's just the default, but even people who know to change the default, some people don't, because when you publish something as remixable, just literally anyone can download it and then just publish it themselves. And like you'll still get credit for it, but then it'll be under this other person's name. And so, you know, the game comes with a ton of tutorials and stuff for like learning the basics of going through the editor and like doing some basic logic and modeling and animation and all this stuff. And like I've gone through, I went through all those tutorials in the early access. They've added some more since then that I haven't really looked at. But really, I just want to look at like the things other people have made and how they put them together. For example, like someone made Tetris. Someone made a fully functional, playable version of Tetris in Dreams. And like, hold on, let me just clear a line just to demonstrate that this is in fact fully functional Tetris. This is not going to be the world's best Tetris play. Like, how do you rotate? Oh, it's X and square. There we go. Yeah, look at that. So someone, like, even though this game doesn't have arrays and it doesn't really have a grid system, someone managed to create a pretty damn functional version of Tetris. And I would sure like to know, I'd like to go in and see how they made this thing. But as it stands, there is no way to do that unless they explicitly mark it as remixable. And that's a big bummer. Because like, if I could do that, I would totally just spend hours finding all these weird creations people have made and just seeing, okay, how did you do this? Or even if I didn't want to like explicitly figure out how, just like look at their wiring, their literal spaghetti code that they put together to make these things. And so yeah, I figured to combat that, I would like make my own dream, publish it as remixable, but then also do a stream/video where I go into detail about how it was made. And, you know, just to disclaim, this is not going to be some revolutionary, like, blow your mind game like some of the things people have made in Dreams. Like I said, I didn't really learn the toolset much during the early access, so this was literally just me like fiddling around on and off for the past week to see what I could piece together. And I decided to basically create a endless survival, like a survive 'em up sort of game, based off the Jevil fight from Deltarune. And it's not even the full fight though, literally just one attack that he does, where he spams around the arena and shoots these spades at you. And so I'll just play the game real quick to show you the end result. And so it's got, yeah, you move the heart, you have control of it with either the analog stick or the D-pad. And you know, you're just trying to survive as long as you'd like. There are actually 2 leaderboards on this for either time survived or tension points. If you played Deltarune, you know you get tension points for grazing bullets like this. And so if you want to go for a more risky play, you can try and like graze up against bullets. Or if you want to just survive, you can just try and survive. And so yeah, it's definitely not a revolutionary thing. There are some bugs, for sure. But it's kind of fun to play. It's like responsive in a way a lot of Dream games aren't. And I'm not playing super well. I'm going to blame, anytime I play poorly, I'm going to blame that on the fact that I'm talking and the latency of playing in the OBS capture window. So, just a heads up there. But, you know, I put some level of attention to detail into this. I think it plays decently well. It's maybe a little easy, and it's certainly pretty repetitive if you get good enough to survive for too long. But I think it's an okay game. I think it's a pretty okay Dream as far as Dreams go. There are certainly a lot worse Dreams out there. And, you know, I could play this for a while longer. But I'll just go ahead and die just to show you the death animation, which I'm pretty happy with. Should be the next hit. Yeah, and then so then when you die, it saves your high scores in terms of time survived and tension points. So yeah, that's the game I made, the Dream I made, so to speak. So let's just pop into the editor. Oh, sorry, I want to pop into not the Dream editor, but the Scene editor. It's a little confusing because this Dream is literally just one scene. But you know, you can imagine a Dream is composed of you know, like multiple scenes that are connected. You can think of those as like levels. But this, of course, just being like a one-screen game, it's literally just this one scene. And so, yeah, this is it. This is the nightmare spaghetti code that makes this Dream happen. And so this isn't going to be, you know, a structured code review or anything like I did in my other code review videos. It's not like I can open my Python file and just like start from line 1 or like start from the main method or anything. It's just kind of wiring and logic chips everywhere. So we just kind of have to start somewhere. I'm not going to go in like excruciating detail. I don't want to make this like a super long stream where I just go on forever. But I do want to like highlight some of the interesting things, some of the difficult things, and some of the easy things as well. So I guess we can start with the character movement, which is actually a little more interesting than you think. So like Dreams, I feel like the easiest kinds of things to do in Dreams are to just like pop into the Dreamiverse or whatever and like find one of Meteor Molecule's like built-in characters that they've made, and then just like plop that down in a scene, and then hit play, and like boom, you've made a 3D platformer, right? And then you can like, you know, place other objects in the scene. You can make platforms. You can do some basic logic where you have like trigger zones that trigger different events, that sort of thing. And that sort of thing, I think, is really where Dreams shines, where it's like super easy. Literally anyone can make a game. You know, you just go through the basic tutorials for like moving objects and camera controls and that stuff, and you can totally make a video game. You can make a functional video game. But if you want to do anything that isn't available as like a built-in preset, that's something that I really struggled with, especially during the early access, is like even just basic character movement is somehow feels much harder to do in Dreams than it should be. And especially if you want to do something on a 2D plane, because Dreams, let me tell you, does not like to keep things set on a 2D plane. It's got a 3D physics engine. There's no good way, so far as I know, to just like disable the Z-axis. And so to get this heart moving around the screen in a way that like feels smooth and natural, and also like on a 2D plane, I basically just did it all by hand as you would in a game engine. So this was like literally the first chip I put down. It's the controller sensor. And there's not really much going on here. I just set it to be remote controllable so that you can play the game while you're in the editor, which is usually a terrible idea. But then it's got these wires coming out that represent basically movement vector or position vectors for the left stick, the right stick, and the D-pad. And so I just took took those vectors for the left stick and the D-pad, and then I pumped these into this OR gate. And this is the sort of thing where I don't know if the game ever explicitly tells you that this is how OR gates work, but it's the sort of thing where like you have this knowledge from programming that in these loosely typed languages, OR gates will work properly on like floating point values, or in this case even vectors, where we'll basically let through the first non-zero thing, which is kind of how it works in like JavaScript as well. So in this case, if the D-pad is non-zero, it'll let the D-pad through, but otherwise it'll let the analog stick through. And so that way you can combine the inputs from the D-pad and the analog stick without having to like add them together. Because if you add them together, then you're gonna have issues where you can move at faster than one, or you could like push left on the D-pad and right on the analog stick, and it'll cancel out your movement, which is maybe what you want. There's certainly merit to that approach because, as you'll see in the next step. So anyway, I discovered an issue, which was that early on, which is that if you move using the analog stick, the analog stick on a DualShock 4 has like a little, it moves in a circle, obviously, like any analog stick, except like the GameCube. And so the vector you get out of it always has a maximum magnitude of 1. It'll always ever be within the unit circle. But when you're using D-pad movement, it will give you a vector that's within like the unit square, and so if you press up and right on the D-pad, you'll get the vector 1, 1, which has, magnitude square root 2. So you'll move faster diagonally using the D-pad than you do vertically and horizontally. And so the solution to that, obviously, is to, just limit the magnitude of the vector that you get out. And that's my first like issue with Dreams, is that it really doesn't want you to think in terms of like game design or games programming terms like vectors. This game does not like to use the word vectors anywhere in its documentation or in its chips set. So like that's one of the nice things about using real game engines versus just like coding something from scratch. It's like, Unity or Godot or that sort of thing. They'll give you all these built-in libraries for vector functions, for like magnitude of a vector, for normalizing a vector, for limiting a vector, for lerping between vectors, all these great convenient tools. And Dreams doesn't really have anything quite like that. So let me pop out into a blank scene just so I don't mess with this, just to show you some of the oddities that come with working in vectors in Dreams, and like some of the difficulties you might face if you're thinking about things in like programming terms. So let's just pop down an empty controller sensor, and then we'll also pop down a calculator. I apologize that I'm not as efficient at navigating the menu. I've been like watching streams of people, of like Media Molecule people, and like Tapgiles, I think, is one of the people who spent a lot of time in early access. And the way they navigate the menus, they're just so efficient. I'm nowhere near as efficient as that, so I do apologize for that. Let me set my number displayer to have decimal points. Okay, and so we'll take so let's suppose we want to normalize a vector, or not even that. Let's just find the magnitude of a vector, right? So we take this signal coming from the left stick, and we pass. Let's set this to be remote controllable. We pass that into the calculator, and then the calculator has all these different options for what math operation you want to do. And you'll notice nothing here says magnitude of a vector, but they do give you absolute value. And as you know from math, like absolute value is basically equivalent to magnitude. And so absolute value of a vector, you might logically expect, if in this game sort of loosey-goosey logic, where like OR gates pass through the first non-zero thing, like maybe passing the absolute value, or passing a vector into the absolute value function might give you the magnitude. You might think that. That might be a reasonable thing to think. And so you test it, you pass your vector into the absolute value function, and then you take the result from that, and you pass it into this number displayer, and then we play the game. And so now I'm moving the stick left and right and up and down, and then also diagonally. And you see, even when I move it diagonally, or move it all in a circle, moving the analog stick, you see the number that's displayed is about 1 all around the bounds of the analog stick. So it sure seems like it's giving you, this is calculating the magnitude of the vector, and then it's displaying it. And so you might think that, but you'd be wrong. And if you tried to use that magnitude in some calculation or something, just everything would break. I can tell you this from experience. Because let's look closely at this. If you look at the controller sensor, you can see I have this wire connected from the left stick to the calculator. But this isn't just a normal wire. See, this wire has actually 2 wires in it. It's what they call a thick wire, or what a normal person might call a vector. It's actually carrying 2 data signals. And if we take a splitter, we can actually see what those 2 data signals are. In this case, you can see it's a controller vector, and it has an X and a Y component. But then we take the result from the supposed magnitude function, and we pass it into the number displayer, and you see it's still a thick wire. It's still a vector, which doesn't make that much sense if you're taking the magnitude of it. And in fact, if we take this wire and pass it into the splitter, we see it's still a controller vector with an X and a Y thing. So the thing to realize about the calculators in Dreams is that, yeah, they'll do vector operations, but not always the way you'd think, because they always do vector operations element-wise. So far as I can tell, I haven't experimentally confirmed this with everything, but if you add 2 vectors with a calculator, you will get the element-wise addition, which is what you'd expect. And subtraction, multiplication, if you multiply 2 vectors, that will, I'm pretty sure, be the element-wise multiplication, which is almost never what you want. You can at least multiply a vector by a scalar. That will work correctly. And divide a vector by a scalar. Greater than, I'm pretty sure, will be element-wise rather than magnitude-wise. Or minimum, again, will be element-wise rather than magnitude-wise, like you would kind of expect. And indeed, the absolute value function on a vector in Dreams will be element-wise absolute value. So then, why is it calculating the magnitude? Well, this number displayer takes a number to display, but apparently, for some reason, when you pass a vector into something that is expecting a number, it calculates the magnitude of the vector. That's how you calculate the magnitude of a vector in Dreams, is by just passing it into something that expects a number. So, one way to do that, so this calculator wasn't actually doing anything, is what I realized. So the way to do it, is maybe not the best way, maybe there's a better way, is to use a combiner and set the combiner to number. And so the combiner will take whatever you pass into it and convert it into a number, and then take that. And now you see what we've got as a result is just a normal-ass wire. And that is the actual magnitude of the vector. And so yeah, someone in the chat is saying, I'm guessing Dreams is more of an overgrown level designer than a game engine. And that's the weird thing, is because, yeah, it's a level editor. If you want to do that, if you want to just make 3D platformers or first-person shooters or or rolling marble games, one of the templates they give you, and you just want to place some platforms down, edit levels, create super simple trigger zones and events and some simple animations, that sort of thing. Dreams is brilliant for that. And it's so simple to do that sort of thing. But when you want to do more complex things, because again, it's Turing complete, and they give you so much control that you can make damn near anything. On the Dreams Discord, there's an FAQ, and it's can I make ? And the answer is yes. And then it's parentheses, except for what was it, MMOs and what was the FMV games. Those are the 2 things that you can't make in Dreams, because it doesn't have the multiplayer capability, and obviously you can't import full motion video. So, like, you can make anything in Dreams, but, like, the farther you get from what the game is, like, expecting for you, and, like, what is providing you the tools to make, the harder it gets. And in some cases, the more you think in terms of, like, traditional game engines and traditional programming, the harder it is to wrap your mind around the way Dreams wants you to think. And that I think has really been my struggle with Dreams. But it's a fun struggle. It's like unraveling a puzzle and like figuring out the way these different pieces fit together. It's like, ooh, can I do this? Can I do that? And you know, sometimes there's just like really annoying things. It's like, I think I should be able to do this. It really seems like I should be able to do this easily. And like usually you can figure out a way to do damn near anything, but doing it easily, doing it in a way that makes sense, I haven't always been able to figure out a way to do. So anyway, that's enough about vectors. Let me go back to the actual game where we left off. So where we left off is that I was trying to normalize a vector, or trying to limit the magnitude of a vector. And so I didn't realize that little trick about calculating the magnitude until too late. So, whoops, come back. I'm still terrible at navigating the menus. So I just kind of did it manually, which is still pretty easy. Like doing basic math things is still pretty easy in Dreams. So I just taken the vector, split it, calculate the square of the x and y, add them, calculate their square root. They don't give you a square root, but they do give you power, and so you can just do power to a half. And then, you know, you divide so that gives you the magnitude. That's just the distance formula. You divide the vector by its magnitude, and that gives you the normalized vector. And then you take the minimum of the magnitude of the vector in 1, and then you multiply the normalized vector by that, and then you get a vector that is limited to the unit circle. And that's how you do that in Dreams. And like that's pretty easy. That's pretty easy, but I just spent so long thinking like, oh, there's got to be a better way. There's got to be some built-in thing for this, because I feel like any reasonable game engine would have something like that built in, but Dreams, I guess, doesn't really want you to think in those terms. It wants you to just do the most basic-ass things. So, yeah, there's someone in the chat is asking, have I played Artstream? Yeah, Artstream is fantastic. We'll be taking a look at Artstream towards the end of the stream, because there's some wild shit in there. And yeah, Dreams. So, yeah, someone else is saying people can use this. I'm going to keep backing out of this thing and just being like, don't save, don't save. Someone is like, people can use this for, like, exploring artistic ideas. And, yeah, that's what I think is maybe it's really best for, is making, like, and I don't mean this in a derisive way at all, but making, like, YouTube poop quality games. Just, like, making quick sketch-level games. Like, not, you know, certainly, like, looking at Artstream, looking at some of the things people have put hundreds and hundreds of hours to, you can definitely make like a huge polished game in Dreams. But I think where it really shines is just going to be like democratizing, so to speak, the process of just making like super quick, sort of jokey games. Because I don't know if I'm going to be able to readily find it. One of my favorite things I've played in Dreams was this very silly thing, called Persnickety 5. Which I won't spend too much time in, but it's just a very silly little Persona 5 game where you play as Morgana, and like you can jump around. It's like a 3D platformer, and every time you jump, he plays like a little voice clip where he's saying like, "Looking cool, Joker." He's like, "Look cool, joke, cool." And it's just like this dumb thing, and you end up getting in like this turn-based RPG battle towards the end. Dreams is just absolutely fantastic for this kind of thing. Like, I saw someone made like a playable Hotel Mario cutscene, that sort of thing. Like, Dreams is absolutely fantastic for that sort of thing, and I very much... Like, obviously, I'm looking forward to seeing, like, what sort of crazy, super polished things people make. But just the fact that there's going to be so much of this sort of thing, I love that. I love that. Anyway, back to my dream. My main interest in Dreams, if you haven't figured it, is just, like, pushing the limits of the engine and, like, seeing what all you can make this thing do, which is supposedly everything. So anyway, we get that. limited vector, we multiply it by this movement speed, and then I also have this global speed variable that controls the overall speed of the game. Yeah, it's a shitposting engine, basically. You multiply all those things together to get the ultimate vector. And so then the question is, so you have this heart now that can move around the screen, but you want to keep it inside this box. And so how do you do that? How do you do that? And so I think the way Dreams wants you to do it is to literally like go into the sculpting tool and like paint and like sculpt just a border around your box. Obviously you do it more carefully than that, but like literally just use the physics engine to do that, just to limit movement. And I was like, you know, I don't want to fuck with the physics engine. Physics engines, it's overkill. It feels like overkill. So I did the not overkill thing of just placing down all these logic gates. That's checking like what is my X position, what is my Y position, what is the magnitude of the vector, am I allowed to go in this direction, limiting it to, you know, such and such. And so the game doesn't really want you to deal with coordinates in that way, but you totally can. You totally can. If you... The only way... what it really doesn't want you to do is to manage transforms, I think, which is, you know, like a vector, again, representing like position, scale, and orientation. But it will let you get to transform. So if you place down a tag on an object, a tag has a scene space transform, which gets you then a... here, you can see this. It gets you a transform fat wire, which you can then split into position, rotation, and scale. And then you can then split that position fat wire into an X, Y, and Z coordinate, and then you can do vector maths, you know? And so that's basically what I do here, is I check that it's within the bounds. It's not perfect, because if you are trying to go outside the bounds, it just stops you from moving. It doesn't snap you back inside. And so you can kind of clip through the walls a little bit, but whatever. If I wanted to do this again... If I was to redo this, or if I wanted to like refactor my code, those massive scare quotes there, I would probably use tags and just like put tags on the corners of this box, and then like extract the transforms from those tags and then do math based off those rather than like hard coding values, because that, you know, that just makes it easier to see to work with, and then you can like move those tags around, do all that stuff. Anyway, all of that is ultimately going into a mover, which just sets your velocity. And so yeah, I didn't care. So the game doesn't really tell you, so far as I know, like which way is X, which way is Y, which way is Z. And so I wasn't, when I was first like placing down all these objects and like building the box and stuff, I wasn't carefully thinking about like, okay, which way am I oriented? Which way is positive X? That sort of thing. And so I just had to kind of guess and check for a while to try and like find a thing that actually works. But ultimately I got it working, the movement. And it's, you know, it's perfectly responsive. Like you move the stick and you let go of the stick and you stop moving. You've got full analog control. Like it feels as perfect as a game can. Which a lot of things in Dreams don't. A lot of things in Dreams are like using the physics engine. They've got like weird momentum and friction and stuff, which like can feel good if you fine tune it, but a lot of Dreams don't. Whereas if you just have like basic ass movement like this, where it's like you push the stick, you move that fast, that's always just gonna feel perfect. And so like I published this stream just like half an hour ago for the first time, and I got one comment that was like, hey, this feels great to play. And I was like, yes, it's because it just controls like a normal ass video game, and it doesn't do any weird physics engine stuff. Well, we don't want to look at this chip yet. That one's too complicated. So anyway, that was how I got started. And so from there I don't really know where to go next, because all of this code is a mess. Like I maybe that's just the nature of literally having like chips that you place down and connect with wires. But you know, looking at some of the stuff Media Molecule has made, and we'll take a look at that later, it is definitely possible to write, so to speak, clean code in Dreams. I did not practice any clean code practices while making my dream. That I did not use test-driven development or anything of the sort. There are no comments here. Some of my variable names are still wrong. So I don't necessarily want to show everything. I don't even know how I would show everything. But I at least want to show off some of the interesting things. And maybe the hardest or the most interesting challenge was figuring out how to get Jevil himself to teleport around the screen like this. So you can obviously probably tell he's not literally teleporting around the screen, because there are two of him on the screen at the same time, which is how it actually looks in Deltarune. Oh, thanks for the that's a super chat, right? 99 what do you call those, euro cents? Are they just called euro cents? I don't actually know. Anyway. Are they just called cents? If I just say cents, that would mean dollar. That would mean US cents. Anyway. So yeah, he's not actually teleporting around. There's always at least two of him on the screen. And so the way I did that, and this is maybe not the best way. In fact, it's almost certainly not the best way. Eurocents. Yeah, see, I know English. So this is gonna be, we're gonna have to like do a little loop around basically to show you how this works. But it all starts here at this emitter. This emitter is making Jevils, and it makes one Jevil every second or so. That's controlled by, so you have this time between emits. What are they called? Gizmo. And that's controlled by this 1/speed variable, which is just the speed 1 over the speed. And the speed increases as the game goes along. And so that's making Jevils. And so normally, I really don't want to like keep popping into new scenes, because then I have to like pull up the editor again and stuff. So anyway, emitters are kind of funky. But so I want to take some time to show you how emitters work. So they are in movers and outputters, I believe. Yeah. So you take an emitter and you make an object, let's say this cube, and you go to the emitter and you wire the emitter up to the cube, and then there you have this position and like velocity gizmo, and that lets you control how the object is emitted. You can be like, I want it to be emitted here, and I want it to be going that fast. I want it to emit continuously and have like 1 second between them. And then you play the game, and it makes cubes. Look at that. Cubes, 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 cubes. Yeah, it's fantastic. So anyway, the cool thing about Dreams, I didn't mention this, but one of the cool things about Dreams is that everything in the, whenever you like pop into like an inspector for an object, you'll notice everything has like an input port and an output port. And so, you know, obviously you can go in here and you can like tweak these things manually, but then also damn near everything in Dreams can be controlled programmatically through their system of logic gates and wires and stuff. But sometimes you'll run into things that can't be directly controlled programmatically. For example, this position gizmo doesn't really, you know, it doesn't exist on this thing. So how do you control this programmatically? Well, as it turns out, the game actually does give you the ability to input a scene space transform that will control where the emitted object is. So that's cool. Like that way the game gives you, if you want to do that, you know, vector math by hand or whatever, like you can totally control things using scene space transforms. But it's limited. Like the game really doesn't want you to do things with scene space transforms. So for example, you have it's in here somewhere, the teleporter. So if you want an object, say you don't want to fuck with the physics engine at all. You just want an object that literally teleports around the screen. It like exists in one place and then it exists in another place. You can do that using a teleporter, but you'll notice the teleporter doesn't really have many options. You can enter a tag. There are no tags in the scene, but if there was a tag in the scene, you can enter a tag and it'll teleport to that tag. And you can choose whether you want it to actually match the target's position, and orientation, and so you could have it, do one or the other, that sort of thing. And then you can connect it to it, wire it up to an object. But you'll notice this does not have an input for a scene space transform. This looks like a scene space transform, but this is actually just a Boolean value. And so if you want to teleport an object to a specific transform, to a specific coordinate in coordinate space, so far as I know, there is no way to do that in Dreams. Now, what I just discovered, like literally last night when I was messing around with the editor, is that if you use a follower, so a follower is designed to make an object move towards another object, and you can do that using tags, but it also takes an input for target position. And so you could pass in a transform to a follower, and then you could set the follower speed to like 99999. There is a limit to the speed. It's never going to be instant, but you give it instant, max strength, max damping, and through that you could kind of make an object go to a coordinate. But it's not instantaneous. It's not instantaneous in the way a teleporter is, which is kind of weirdly limiting, So anyway, that's enough of a digression. Let's go back to my game so I can show you how Jevil works. And so, because you can make an object spawn at a transform, what I could have done is just be like, okay, I want Jevil to spawn somewhere within this box, and then use a random number generator to calculate a random x coordinate within that box and a random y coordinate within that box, and then build up a transform that corresponds to that coordinate, and then spawn him there. There's a few problems with that approach. The first is that it's tedious, doing all that math and figuring out what the actual coordinates are that I would want. The second is that Dreams does not have a random number generator, which is, when I first realized that, I was like, wait, what? Seriously? It has a randomizer, and the randomizer will let you choose between 1 and 10 random outputs. And so, you could build a random number generator, and certainly you could just go on the Dreamiverse and search for a random number generator that someone else has made. There are plenty of those out there. But it just doesn't have a built-in literal random number generator, which is just bizarre to me, and that just sort of reinforces my notion that this game kind of doesn't want you to do math or think about vectors or any of that stuff. So anyway, what I ended up doing was just placing just a set of tags, just placing 10 tags down on the scene. Oh yeah, the other issue is that if you just do pure randomness, it's possible he'll spawn in the same spot twice and then be overlapping himself. And obviously there are ways to counteract that. It's at that point it's just getting more and more complicated, when kind of the simpler approach, in some regards, the simpler approach is to just place a bunch of tags that correspond to coordinates at places he can spawn. And so I just have 10 of those down. And then I have a randomizer here, which has 10 outputs, each of which is connected to the power on one of these tags. And so the end result of that is you have this huge mess of wires. So really, this solution is, in some regards, a lot simpler. But in other regards, it leads to having this colossal mess of wires, which are just completely impossible to follow. Because in addition to all these wires going into the power of each tag, we also have a thick wire coming out of the scene space transform of each tag. And all of those wires come together into this node. And so, the way wires work in Dreams is actually that you can control it. So I didn't actually realize this at first. But if you hover over the input of a wire and you hold L1, I have no idea if the game tells you this anywhere, but I found it on the... Yeah, if you hover over it, it'll give you the tooltip. That's you can hold L1 and you can see, you can change what happens when you have multiple wires going into the same node. And so this actually led to an issue where if you have like something like a calculator or like a number displayer that has a slider on it, like this, and you set the slider to something, and then I guess at some point I'd accidentally set the wire mode to blend or like multiply or modulate. And so then it was multiplying the value that you set on the slider with the value that you fed in through the wire. And so where I was supposed to have like 90 health, actually I was having like 9,000 health or something. I eventually figured that out. So anyway, by default, it will do overwrite, and so it'll just take the first non-zero value. And so actually, now that I think about it, earlier when I was doing the controller input, I didn't even need that OR gate. I could have just fed those wires directly into like a calculator. But anyway, doesn't matter that much. So anyway, because we're using this randomizer, only ever one of these tags will be active at a time, and so only ever one will actually be sending out a signal. And so I think all the others will just be sending out like a 0 or like a null, or I don't really know how it's represented. But the point is only one of those signals will actually be getting through this node at a time, and you'll see it's going into the splitter, and it's of type transform. And so we're splitting that transform, we're getting its position, its rotation, and its scale. And so this was an issue I was having, is where the Jevils just weren't spawning at all. And the reason is, so each of these tags will output a transform with a position, rotation, and scale. And the position and the rotation make enough sense. It exists in space and it has an orientation. But the scale, a tag really corresponds to a point in space. It doesn't have a scale. And so what was happening is that the scale was being set to 0. And so Jevil was getting spawned in with a scale of 0, and the game was just deleting him because, you know, he doesn't exist. So I just have this 1 here that's getting fed into the scale value instead of taking the value from the node. So anyway, that output is then going into the transform input on this emitter, and that is spawning Jevil at a location with the appropriate orientation and with a scale of 1. And it took a while, like, coming up with that logic, like that circular logic. Oh, and then every time he spawns, it triggers the randomizer to shuffle again. That's somewhere else in this logic, because this thing has tons of action at a distance and just poor programming practices in general. Not that, you know, in some cases Dreams encourages that sort of thing. In some cases it's me being lazy. Anyway, so that's how Jevil spawns around the arena, and it actually works pretty okay, I'd say. And it's all, everything in the game, everything in this scene is controllable by that speed variable. So anyway, let's take a look now at Jevil himself. He was one of the last things I got working properly, and I'll tell you why in a bit. Well, first you'll notice that Jevil's not here at all. This was something I struggled with during the early access. Is like, okay, I made Jevil, I set him up, I wired him up to an emitter. Where the hell is he? He's just gone. Because when you connect something to an emitter, it ceases to actually exist in the scene until it's emitted by the emitter. So it's like, okay, how do I edit him? And I never figured this out in the early access, but the answer is pretty easy. You just disable preview invisibility so you can see invisible objects, and hey, look, there he is. So we can look at Jevil's microchip now. And it took me a while. You can see it's kind of a mess. This was like the last thing I was working on. So when Jevil spawns in, basically he has this timeline, and the timeline has a playback speed, which is itself controlled by the speed variable, and then the timeline. So timelines in Dreams, I haven't fully wrapped my head around them, but timelines and keyframes, just the whole animation and music system in Dreams is super powerful, and not just like you'd think for animation and music, because yeah, you can place down a timeline like this, and then you can like play the playhead, which doesn't actually work. That's something I'll talk about later. But you can play a timeline, and you can put music clips on a timeline, you can put keyframes on a timeline, but really you can put literally anything on a timeline. You can put any type of microchip, or any type of, what do they actually call them? Any type of gadget on a timeline. So I have, you know, another timeline on a timeline. I have this audio clip on a timeline. But then I also have an emitter on a timeline, and that emitter will trigger when the playhead reaches the emitter. I have this switch, and the switch will turn on when the playhead reaches it. And I honestly don't even remember what that that switch is wired up back here. Again, action at a distance. That switch is wired up to this thing, and it triggers the randomizer. And then I also have this destroyer. These destroyers wired up to this timeline, and so when the playhead reaches that destroyer, it'll destroy itself. And so like that's super powerful on its own. But then when you combine that with keyframes, which I don't have any keyframes. Well, actually, no, I do have keyframes inside these sub-timelines. But these keyframes don't really do much. These keyframes are literally just for animation. But later on when we're talking about the UI, I'll show you some other things you can do with keyframes, because keyframes are just insanely powerful in Dreams. And they're, like, again, tricky to wrap your head around. But once you do, you can do some really powerful things. Some really expressive things. So anyway, this timeline itself has 2 further timelines in it. Basically, each of these timelines is his, like, spinning animation. And the reason I have... He's like, spinning, and then he, like, opens his arms and, like, shoots out the spades. And so the reason that there are 2 timelines is because I needed 2 different... So I originally just, like, made a spinning animation. It was, like, kind of shitty. And I was like, okay, I'll work with that while I'm making the game. But then as I got close to the end, I had, like, finished everything else. It's like, okay, I need to, like, make his spinning animation actually work properly. Because you'll notice he spawns on the left side and the right side of the screen. And depending on which side he spawns on, he needs to, you know, be facing a different direction. And it took me so long to, like... It doesn't seem like such a hard issue. But it took me, like, way longer. It was way harder than it should have been to get that actually working properly. Ultimately, what I ended up doing was just having 2 timelines. One for when he spawns on the left, and one for when he spawns on the right. And he just spins a different amount in each. And, like, I was having all these issues where, like, copying animations from one timeline to the other, or just even having them outside the timeline just wasn't working properly at all. And so, even his arm opening animation, I just made it twice. Which, you know, that's obviously a terrible programming practice. That's a terrible anything practice. Don't repeat yourself, you know. But that was, like, literally the last thing I did. I was running out of energy for actually working on this. And so, yeah, I just barely got that working. And also, I was running into these weird, what I can only assume are bugs. I honestly don't know if they're bugs or it's just something about the way the game displays that I don't fully understand. But like I was saying earlier, because Jevil doesn't really exist in the scene, he's an object that's being emitted by an emitter, so until the scene's actually running, it doesn't really exist. There are, like, limitations on what you can change in him. So normally when you're editing a keyframe, you know, you like, enable the keyframe, you edit the keyframe, and then, like, you move the objects around the way you want, and then you save the keyframe. But I was having this just bizarre issue where I would go to edit the keyframe, and I would move an object, and it just wouldn't move. It just literally wouldn't move. And ultimately what I ended up having to do is just remove him from the emitter. If that makes sense. None of this might make any sense if you don't have experience, if you haven't messed around much with Dreams. But just needless to say, it was, like, some very bizarre behavior that I can only assume is a bug, and it just made it super frustrating. Anyway. So the cool thing Jevil does, you might have noticed, in fact, you've almost certainly noticed if you're wearing headphones, is that as he spawns, as he jumps around and jumps to these different locations, there's actually stereo audio going on. So when he's on the left, his voice will come from the left, and when he's on the right, his voice will come from the right. But actually, the super cool thing about this is that it's not just stereo audio, it's actually full surround sound. And that was actually my inspiration for making this, for creating specifically this attack. I was like, wouldn't it be cool if I created that attack where Jevil jumps around the screen and he goes, oh, but it was surround sound, so wherever he spawned, it would come from, like, that corresponding speaker. And that's, again, something that's one of those things that's actually pretty easy to do in Dreams, because in the, I always hit the wrong thing. If you go to, so here's the sound effect. Oh, I guess I can talk about importing sounds later, because that's a whole thing. But anyway, this is just a sound effect that someone else uploaded to the game, and that someone has a project on Dreams that's just called Jevil Sounds, and I was like, yep, that's super convenient. I'm very glad that's there. But anyway, so it's got this panning tag, and so you can control the surround panning of an object, and this is actually programmatically controllable. You see, it takes an input, and the input is in the form of an XY coordinate, basically. And so it just takes a little bit of coordinate math here. Some actually, pretty simple coordinate math. We have this tag here that corresponds to Jevil's location. And then there's another tag that's on the heart, and that's what this wire coming in is. And so we have these two coordinates. And so then it's just some, simple math to subtract the coordinates, extract out the X and Y components, and then I have to, multiply it, because they're like swapped and negative and inverted, that sort of thing. So you just swap those around, and that's how you get the position the relative position between the heart and Jevil. And then you just feed that into the audio clip, and it'll do the surround sound audio for you, which is pretty nice. And then I also use this coordinate math to determine whether he's spawning on the left side or the right side, and use that to trigger one animation or the other. So yeah, that works pretty simply. Oh yeah, and you can see I have those wires literally going into this timeline. So the timeline is being triggered both by the playhead and by these wires coming in, which is just a huge mess. It's maybe not ideal to do things that way, but whatever. That's the way I did it. So anyway, let me talk about sound effects next. So obviously the sounds of like Jevil talking and like going, yeah, this is like his voice lines. Those obviously have to be imported into the game somehow. I'm not going to be able to recreate those in the game. And the way you import sounds in Dreams, so there are 3 ways, basically. There used to be a tool on the internet called, it was on the like indreams.me website, like the official Dreams website, where you could literally just like upload an MP3 file and it would import it into the game, and you could use that. Pretty early in the early access, or possibly even in the beta, they removed that feature. So you couldn't do that anymore. But what you could still do, there were still 2 ways to import sounds. You could either, because the DualShock has a mic jack, has like a headphone, it has a headset jack on the bottom, and so if you have a 4-pole 3.5mm audio cable, and it specifically has to be a 4-pole version, you can connect that up to an audio source and connect the other end of the cable to your DualShock, and then you can literally like just record audio off like a phone or something. But again, you specifically need a 4-pole audio cable, and most male-to-male 3.5mm cables are the standard 3-pole kind that don't carry a mic signal. So I didn't have any of those lying around. And the other way to import things was actually pretty clever, because the PS4 has like a remote play feature where you can basically stream your PS4 games to a PC and play them there. And PS4 remote play actually, surprisingly enough, supports mic input. And so you can use a microphone on your PC to record things on PS4, and then obviously once you're on a PC, it's easy enough to just create a fake microphone that's actually like a line out connected back to a line in through like a virtual audio cable or something like that. And that was actually the highest quality way to import audio. But they disabled that feature with the 1.0 release. They disabled the ability to record over remote play. So without any of those ways, the only way for me to import, unless I wanted to go out and buy a cable, which just feels weird, the only way to record audio is to literally just put connect a headset to the controller and put it up to a speaker. And I tried that, and it sounds terrible. It just sounds horrendous. You can 100% tell it's just recorded with a microphone. So that's unfortunate. Fortunately, some very kind people had already imported most of the sound effects I had needed. So like all of Jevil's voice lines were imported. The music itself, here, I can show you the music itself. It's over here. Dreams has some pretty powerful music creation tools, and there are lots of people who are like recreating or like resequencing songs in Dreams. But some guy just took The World Revolving and just recorded the entire thing into a giant audio file and imported that into Dreams, and that works well enough, I suppose. There's also someone else who resequenced it, but I figured I might as well go with the one that actually sounds like the real thing. And like the death animation, someone recorded that, but there were just, a handful of animation, or a handful of sound effects that other people hadn't made and that I didn't have ways to import. And so I was like, okay, I just have to recreate these sound effects from scratch using the tools in Dreams. And good lord, some of those were pretty easy. Like the click sound when you're grazing bullets, that was super easy. Someone just had a click sound. I just needed to like pitch it up or down or something, and that just sounded great. But some other things were a lot harder. So like the sound of Jevil teleporting. Actually, no. Let me show you the one that took me the longest because it was the first one I did, and that's the sound of you getting hit. And so that's here, I think. Yeah. So that's this timeline, specifically this audio clip. So I tried all sorts of things. So if you've ever made a game, like a game jam game, you're probably familiar with the tool BFXer, which is just this website. It's like this online synthesizer that's like super easy to use for making specifically video game sound effects, like kind of 8-bit lo-fi video game sound effects. It just gives you like literally sliders and presets, and it's just like so easy and intuitive, and you can just make really great sounding game sound effects using this tool. Dreams, unfortunately, doesn't have anything quite that easy or intuitive, and so I spent a long time just like messing with all the tabs in this thing. Like it does have this oscillator tab, and it's like, oh, maybe I can do something with that to like hook something up to something else and try and recreate the effect I could get in BFXer. But I tried for so long, and I could not get it to sound good. Eventually, what I ended up doing was I just found someone who recorded just a sine wave, just a normalized sine wave, and then I went into the piano roll editor, where you're meant to like draw notes on your piano roll, but it also lets you draw freeform notes. And so I literally just did this like down sloping tone and then just like this other harmonic, and it just pew pew. It sounds pretty good, I'd say. For such a simple sound effect, it took me like well over an hour just like agonizing over like, okay, what's the best way to do this in Dreams? Ultimately, that's what I settled on. The sound effect I never really ended up happy with is the sound of Jevil teleporting. I just kind of half-assed it with this sound. Oh, right, it's not going to play, but you could hear it in the game. Yeah, it's just this kind of like white noise, crashy sort of sound. It doesn't sound quite like it does in Deltarune, but it's such a minor sound effect that it's good enough. And yeah, so all the other sound effects, I was able to find someone who had imported them from the actual game, or something that at least sounded close enough. And so I was able to go with those. So yeah. Let's talk, I guess, about the bullets next, because that's a mildly interesting thing. Again, this is probably a decent way to do this. So Jevil himself doesn't actually spawn the bullets. Instead, he spawns something else. He has this emitter. And the emitter takes Jevil's location as an input. It's coming from that other chip. But instead of spawning the bullets directly, he spawns this here cone. Whoops. And the cone is, it doesn't have a name. Objects don't by default have names. But you can think of this as the bullet emitter itself. And that has some logic on it as well. So whenever it spawns in, it has this look at rotator, which is pointing towards this tag in the heart. And it's set to this speed of, 10,000 degrees a second, 100% strength. But then it's only doing it in the X, or the Y and the Z axis, but not the X axis. And it's, got like infinite distance. So basically, as soon as this thing spawns in, it'll like, basically within a frame, it'll spin to point at the heart. Whoops, it's over here. And then I've got this timer. I could have done this with the timeline, but I kind of like timers. And the timer is set to be like 0.1 seconds later. It's got all these emitters, which are... Oh, why aren't they showing up? Oh, do I have to actually open them? Yeah. Yeah, so that's literally just spawning in all of the spades. And I just kind of had to position those, by hand. I could have, if I really wanted to, I could have actually done the, like, coordinate math using transforms to, like, make it, like a perfect bullet spread or something like that. But I was able to get it pretty good by hand. But this was also an interesting game design sort of thing. Where it's like... So, fun story. When I was first making this, I was like, going back and forth between the actual game and Dreams to see, like, compare between Deltarune and this. But one thing I didn't realize is that the bullets he shoots out are spades. And originally I had modeled, like, these clubs instead. And so at the last minute I had to change it over to spades. And I found this spade model that just someone had made, which was convenient. But the spades that I imported were smaller than the club I had made, and that, could change the balance of the game, because now the bullets are smaller. And also, it kind of screwed up my emitters, said, like, redo my emitters. And so I realized, like, just very slightly changing the spread of the bullets would, like, have a dramatic impact on, like, the difficulty and the engagement of the game. Because at one point I had it so, like, the middle bullet is always pointing directly towards you, but then I had it so the next two were spread out just a little too far. Just a little too far. So you had just a big enough gap that you could get through it between the middle bullet and the side bullet. Just a big enough gap that it wasn't interesting at all to, like, slip between. And so tightening that up just a little, just a hair, was enough to actually make the game kind of fun. So that was interesting to see how such a little change can have such a big impact on the game itself. Anyway, that took a lot of fiddling to get this just right, but in the end, it mostly worked. Obviously, all these emitters are controlled by the speed variable as well, and then the thing destroys itself after a while just to, garbage collect itself. But I was still having this issue where just trying to keep things on the plane, on the 2D plane, because Dreams obviously is a 3D engine. It wants everything to exist in 3D. It really makes no attempt to keep things on planes. Ultimately, what I ended up doing... I would have these issues where, like, one of my angles was just, like, very slightly off. Two lines that would just barely not parallel. And so then you would have a bullet going off, like, towards the screen or behind the screen and just, like, missing the heart entirely, of course. So what I just ended up doing was just adding this follower to every single bullet, and it's following the heart in the x-axis only, and it's doing it like maximum strength. And so basically all of the bullets are just snapping themselves to the plane of the heart, just constantly every single frame, which is kind of the brute force solution to that, but hey, it works. Let's see. What else is interesting? I guess the collision stuff I'll talk about next. Because that's more annoying than you'd think. So, Dreams has a physics engine, and the physics engine really wants to exist. And so what I was having trouble doing... So I wanted to implement the graze mechanic here. I can show you. Like in Deltarune, when you get close to a projectile, it makes that click sound. Oh, it also it rumbles the controller, by the way, whenever you graze past something or when you get hit. Yeah, I want it to be like whenever you get near a bullet, I want it to do that click sound, and you get a tension point, and that counts towards your high score. And so, like, a reasonable way to do that is to just have two hitboxes on the heart, one slightly larger than the other, and then whenever a bullet enters the larger hitbox, you trigger you trigger something. The problem is, I just, for the life of me, I swear there must be a way to do this, but I could not figure out a way to have an object that detects collisions. It will detect, like, on collision start, basically, without evoking the physics engine, right? So you can either have an object that's collidable, in which case two collidable objects will not go through each other. The physics engine will try to prevent that. Or you can have an object that's not collidable, but then it can't detect collisions, which is what I need, obviously, for a hitbox. And so other than collisions, the other concept of a hitbox... Oops, yeah, see, that's the other thing about Dreams, is, like, because you're controlling everything with the controller, it's very easy to just, like, accidentally hit a button and knock something out of place. And if you don't realize that you've done that, and then you go on to edit a bunch of other things to the point that you've lost your undo stack... you can kind of just ruin your entire dream. That may have happened to me once or twice, but I was mostly able to put everything back. Anyway, so the other concept Dreams has, other than just, the physics engine-based collision system, is it has these trigger zones, which are basically like hitboxes. So you can see this is the trigger zone for the graze mechanic. And it's set to detect only clubs. Again, that's the thing I never changed, is I originally had them called clubs, but I never changed it to spades. Anyway, it's set to detect the bullets and nothing else. But the problem is, I don't want to just detect when a bullet is inside the trigger zone. I want to specifically detect when a bullet enters the trigger zone. That's what I'm trying to detect. And so you can imagine if this was Unity or something, you would have a function, a callback that was like on collision enter, right? And so you would put your logic there for when a collision... see, I did it again. I accidentally moved the thing while I was just absent-mindedly moving the controller around. Anyway, so that's how you would do that in like a normal game engine. And again, for actual collisions, like for colliding with the spades, I just use this impact sensor, which is basically like on collision, and then you destroy the spade. I have a corresponding collision sensor on the spade that destroys itself, and that stops the physics engine from actually, doing anything. But the trigger zones, the trigger zone does not have, so far as I know, it does not have a on triggered event. It has, obviously you can detect when something is inside the trigger zone, but I specifically want when something enters the trigger zone. And so far as I can tell, there was no native way to do that. So I sort of had to do it myself, basically. So trigger zones, you can set them to detect a certain number of objects, and then they will output how many they have detected. So then this is the kind of hacky thing, is I take that value, I wire it into a variable, and then variables have a thing that will send a pulse when the value of the variable increases, right? So whenever the number of objects inside the trigger zone increases by detected, by proxy of this variable, then you can trigger a pulse. And then that pulse will go out here into the main heart logic, and that will trigger the graze mechanic and stuff, and all this mess down here that I kind of don't want to look at for too long. And that mostly works, except for there's a few issues. The first, obviously, the main issue is that Dreams runs on a PS4 Pro. It tries to run at 60 FPS. It doesn't always get there. You can watch the Digital Foundry video if you want all the details. But Dreams tries to run at 60 FPS. But the logic... I apologize that my microphone is clipping more than it should, and I'm not paying too much attention to the audio metering. So I apologize if I'm clipping a bunch. Anyway, what was I saying? Right, so the game tries to run at 60, but the logic only ever runs at 30. So all these logic gates and stuff will only ever update at 30 times a second. And so that causes issues. For example, like if you're trying to make a button mashing game, or like a like a rhythm game or something. You know, you might wire up a controller sensor, do something that triggers on the rising edge of a signal. But if, you know, like the player is mashing the button fast enough that they hit it, you know, twice within a 30th of a second or something like that, or even within like a 15th of a second, you'll never get that falling edge of the clock. And so you'll start dropping button inputs. And so the problem here, of course, if you have, say, 2 bullets that enter the trigger zone 1 frame after the other, you'll only have 1 rising edge, and so you won't readily be able to detect that. Or if you have 2 bullets that enter the trigger zone at the same time, that again will just be 1 rising edge. Or again, if you have a bullet that enters and a bullet that leaves on the same frame, which, you know, if the logic was continuous, that would like very rarely happen. Because it's running at only 30 FPS, that can actually happen. So this detection logic isn't perfect by any means. But it's good enough, you know, it's good enough. It's like kind of janky, it's a little janky. But like when you play the actual game, you know, with the speed of the bullets and the way they're spread, like for the most part, most of the grazes get detected properly, and like it feels mostly okay, you know, and that's very much good enough, I would say. I guess I can talk briefly about this logic here. There's some mildly interesting things here. Probably the most interesting thing is these signal manipulators. Signal manipulators are kind of interesting. Basically, they take an input signal and then they produce an output signal, and then you have all these. So those, you know, those would be like analog signals, basically, if you're thinking about this in terms of like electronics. And then they have all these controls for how to manipulate those signals. And so basically the signal that you've grazed a bullet comes in basically as a pulse. Like it's high for 1 frame and then goes back down. But I want to like make the, you know, the outline around the heart, I want that to like appear and then fade out. And so the signal manipulators will do that for you. So you can see on the left is the input to the signal manipulator, and on the right is the output. And so you can see the input is coming in as just like a pulse, and then it's translating into this, you know, it's shrinking it, and then it's also giving it like this fade out effect. And so yeah, that's just like super easy to do. That's something that Dreams makes really easy, and I really love that about it. And so anyway, the signal from that is going into the controller rumbler, for one thing, to make the controller do a little shake. And then that's also going into the oh god, am I gonna be able to find it? That's going into, let me just close this. Yeah, that's going into this thing, the outline, and so that's controlling the glow effect on the outline. And the outline I just drew myself. Like using, since it's just all just straight and diagonal lines on a grid, that's easy enough to just draw using the paint tools. But the heart I found on the Dreamiverse. So that's basically how that works. And then it's the logic for getting hurt is pretty straightforward. I just have a timeline, and then on the timeline you have a variable modifier, because again, you can put literally anything on a timeline, including like modifying variables and stuff. And then I just have some logic somewhere that makes the heart flash, and then some other logic somewhere in here that makes you lose health, and then some other logic that makes it so you can't get hit while you're invincible. That's all pretty straightforward. Like that's the sort of thing that's like easy to do in Dreams, and like if you've gone through the tutorials, that's the sort of thing that you just know how to do because it's easy. I will say you could also have done that using, Dreams has like these built-in health modifiers and health managers, and that has like built-in tools for managing invulnerability and stuff. But it's just such a simple thing to do using the logic anyway, that I figured I might as well just do it. While I'm here talking about the health, though, the one other interesting thing, the mildly interesting thing, is so I don't know if this is actually true, but you know, it's been a while since I played Undertale, or Deltarune. But I feel like it had this thing where you would you would get hit and you would lose a bunch of health, but then as you kept getting hit, you would lose less and less health. So it constantly felt like you were, just barely holding on, like, oh, maybe the next hit will do me in. Oh no, I just barely held on. I don't know if that's an actual mechanic or if that was just like, you know, a psychological thing. But I implemented that here. Instead of just losing a base amount of health every time you get hit, your health is multiplied by 0.85 and then you subtract 3. So, you know, you lose less and less health every time you get hit, which is a neat effect. But that, you know, that's again a pretty basic thing. Let's see, what else should I talk about? So another interesting thing, let me scope in here, is, whoops, I clicked the wrong thing, is, wow, come on, there we go. Oh, I guess I need to, if I want to be able to see, I need to turn on the lights. So when you die, that's actually pretty straightforward. It took a while to, like, get it to look right and, like, be timed correctly. But I basically just have a copy of the heart, and like I use the sculpting tools to like break it into 4 pieces. And then some of the pieces have these like rotators attached to them, and then there's somewhere around here. Here it is. Yeah, there's a force applier, which is just like doing like a sphere of force in the center of the 4 pieces. These are actually 4 pieces here. And then there's a timeline. And so this is where I can start to talk about the cool things with keyframes. So the timeline obviously will play the sound effects, and it'll make your controller rumble. But then it also has this keyframe. And the keyframe, if I look at one of these pieces of heart, yeah, you see under the physical properties, it's set to not movable. But the keyframe is set to just enable that. And like that's just the cool thing about keyframes in Dreams is that you can control damn near anything, even things that can't normally be programmatically controlled. And I'll show you this later when we're dealing with the text boxes. But damn near anything can be controlled with a keyframe in Dreams, which is pretty cool. And so yeah, when you reach that point in the timeline, basically it just turns on physics, and the pieces of the heart go flying across. I guess I can die to demonstrate. I'll just sit here and take a beating for your viewing pleasure. That'll be the next hit. Oh yeah, and the controller rumbles as well. So that's pretty neat. That's one of those things that was like, you know, it took a while to like get it to actually look right and feel right, but actually implementing it, that's the sort of thing that's like super easy to do in Dreams. So anyway, that's most of the core logic of the game. Actually, it's pretty straightforward. I guess the other thing is like the managing like the high scores. That's I guess I can show you real quick. Basically, there's 3 types of variables in Dreams. There's variables, which is normalized variables. There's health, and then there's score. Basically, score and health are both just extensions of variables. They just add extra functionality to a variable. And so a score has a corresponding scoreboard on the game. The name of the scoreboard corresponds to the name of the score, and then it just has this input wire that will post the current value of the score to the leaderboard. And so I have this variable that corresponds to when you die, and then that just triggers these the tension points and the time survived score variables to post to the leaderboard. I thought I would be able to get through this entire stream without going to the bathroom, but that is very clearly not going to happen. So let me, whoops, I keep doing the wrong one. Let me very quickly, BRB. BRB. Oh wait, no, come back. There we go. BRB. I'm back. Just a few more things I want to go through, honestly. Again, I didn't really want this to be too long of a stream. We're already well past the point of that, though, so whatever. Anyway, what was I talking about? Let's see. Yeah, scoreboards, that's super easy. There's just other random stuff, like, yeah, you can control the lighting effects and stuff. Oh, yeah, let me talk about the camera. And the backdrop and stuff. So the backdrop of the Jevil fight, it's like, you know, the spinning carousel thing. And, like, you know, this I just, like, made in the modeling tools. And it's not perfect, mostly because I'm terrible at the modeling tools, and also they don't give you a freaking octagon. They have a hexagon tool, but they don't have an octagon. You know, I didn't put too much detail. I didn't, like, put too much effort into making it look great, because, you know, it appears in the background. It's, like, faded out and stuff. But, anyway, I did want it to at least look pretty close to the way it looks in the game. And the way it looks in the game is that it's kind of like from this perspective, where you can see the whole of the bottom octagon, and you can see, like, the edge of the top octagon. So it's like at this angle, but the two octagons appear on the screen as the same size, but then they, like, rotate at the same speed. And so obviously you'll see here, thanks to perspective, the one that's closer to the screen, because it's tilting forward, looks bigger than the other one. So Deltarune, I'm pretty sure, is actually using an orthographic perspective. I mean, I think it's actually a pre-rendered graphic, but, you know, it's using an orthographic perspective for this model. And Dreams, inexplicably, for all its camera options and stuff, does not have an option for an orthographic camera. But what it does have, whoops, if I can pull the camera up, what it does have is a field of view slider. And, you know, what is an orthographic projection if not a perspective projection from really, really far away with a really small field of view? 10 degrees is the smallest you can make the field of view. So, yeah. You literally just put the camera really far away from the scene. And, you know, obviously in perspective, this looks terrible. But then when you zoom in really close, and then, you know, you frame it the way it actually looks in the game, then, you know, you get this nice, almost not quite orthographic projection. So that's a hot tip for you there. If you want your 3D games to look a little more 2D. But anyway, this stuff is, like, amazingly simple. You just have this model, and it has a rotator, and then the rotator is controlled by the speed variable, and then you also have this thing. So, like, this is what I love about Dreams. Their flex system, and, like, the way you can like, customize flex. So I wanted, you know, obviously this isn't going to look exactly like the background carousel effect in the actual Jevil fight, but I wanted, you know, just like kind of a hazy blue and black thing that sort of moves across the screen. And Dreams makes that sort of thing super easy to do. So, you know, I have these sort of like these like swirly flecks, and I just made this sort of plane. And then you just go into effects, and, you know, you'd be like, yeah, I want about 7% boil, I want about 27% flow. You know, you just tweak these sliders until you get something that, like, kind of looks like what you're looking for, you know? And I think it looks, you know, for the amount of work it took to actually make this thing, which was very little, this, I think, actually looks pretty darn cool. And, of course, in the actual game, it's, like, super faded out. So it's pretty hard to see, even, especially when you're trying to dodge the bullets and stuff. But that's cool. That's the sort of thing that Dreams is great at. Like, if you want to make things that look like Dreams, like if you want to embrace their painterly style and their whole flex system, like, it's really great at that. But at the same time, you can totally make photorealistic things on Dreams. Again, watch the Digital Foundry video if you want to see them. They have 2 videos about Dreams as of this stream, and they just spend a lot of time just ranting and raving and nerding out over the rendering tech that this game uses. It's some impressive stuff. So anyway, So yeah, this is my chip that basically controls all the on-screen stuff, which basically just means having a lot of text boxes. So like the 4x3 borders of the screen, those are just giant black text boxes. You know, you have the HP, the TP time, those things. And then you also have number displayers for displaying those values as well. And like here's the thing that shows your health. That's, you know, there's no strings in Dreams. Like if you look in a text box, like all these things are controllable by wires, but the actual text itself is not controllable by wires, because Dreams has no such thing as a string wire or a string variable, and there's no string operations in Dreams. Whoops. So if you want to make something like a health bar like this, we have like, where'd it go? Oh yeah, we have like 90 out of 90 health, like it says here. That has to just be 3 different text boxes positioned appropriately. The other thing that Dreams doesn't have, which surprised me, because this seems like a thing. If I was making like a simple game engine that's supposed to be like intuitive and easy to use for people, one thing I would totally have is some sort of health displayer. It would have, you know, options for health. If you want to display health as like a number, or you want to display it as like a pie chart, or like wedges, or even just sprites, or as I want to display it because I'm trying to copy Deltarune, if you want a just progress bar, like a bar chart sort of thing. That seems like a pretty basic thing that you would want to include. But Dreams doesn't have that. It does have text boxes, of course, and text boxes can have background colors, and you can, you know, position a text box, you can resize a text box, all that good stuff. But again, these are things that you're doing on the screen, and so because they're not on this, like, I forget what their terminology is for all these different things, but because they're not on this thing, you can't control the position or size of a text box using a wire, which means you can't programmatically do it. Which is a bummer, because that seems like a reasonable thing you'd want to do. So the secret to doing that is to use the mighty keyframe. So here's one of these. Yeah. So this is a keyframe that I made where, you know, when the keyframe is off, you have this health bar and it's full size. But then when the keyframe is on, I just resized the health bar to be really tiny. So keyframe off, you have a full health bar. Keyframe on, you have a small health bar. And then the super cool thing about keyframes is not just that they can control literally anything in the game. Anything that you can control in the editor can be controlled with the keyframe. But it can also interpolate between arbitrary things. So I have this calculator here that is taking your current health and dividing it by your max health, and so that's giving you a number between 0 and 1. And then I'm taking that value, I'm inverting it using this NOT gate, and then I'm passing it into the power signal for this keyframe. And so if I just take control here, you can see as the number goes up, you get more and more of the keyframe active, and as the number goes down, you get less and less of the keyframe active. It's actually the opposite, because the keyframe is opposite of what the logic is. But you get what I'm saying, right? Is like you can pass a floating point value into the keyframe, and it'll interpolate between the two extremes of the keyframe, which is super cool. And then on top of that, you can also set smoothing. And so it's kind of hard to tell in the actual game, but if I turn this like way up, and then if you pay attention to the health bar when I get hit, yeah, you can see it smoothly shrinks down whenever you get hit. I didn't want it to look quite like that, because that's not really what it looks like in the game. But I did leave a little bit of smoothing on, just because I think it looks super cool. And it's just so easy to implement. It's just like one slider. I love that. That's the kind of thing that I just love about Dreams. It just... It's beautiful. That's beautiful. Like, it's kind of hacky that you have to do it through keyframes. Like, there should be some sort of built-in progress bar displayer or graph displayer or something like that. But the fact that you can do it. The one annoying thing is that, like, if I go to edit... Or not this one. Like, if I go to edit a text box, You can see I can, hold on, let me grab it correctly. I can shrink it down, but then it has a minimum size, which is not what I want. I want the health bar to be able to fully deplete. So I just have this little black bar that appears on top of the bottom of the health bar, and because it's all on a black background, it just looks like the health bar fully depletes, when actually it's just hidden behind this little black thing here. So yeah. And then it's a similar effect here for the tension meter. The tension meter, you'll notice, actually exists in the scene, whereas everything else I built, all the other text boxes appear on the screen. Very, very similar words there, scene and screen. I regret making this exist in the scene, because then you just have all these like weird overlapping things that are hard to deal with, whereas all my screen space text boxes I can just lay out nice and simply like this. So yeah, if I wanted to spend some time refactoring, that's one thing I would do, is I would just move all of these things to screen space, because there's no real reason for them to be in scene space. Although the game does treat things in scene space and screen space slightly differently in some regards. So the game has this cool effects tool that you can use to just do like post-processing effects on the entire screen. And one of them that I considered turning on for this game, but I decided not to, because I think it didn't look quite right. But it has a pixelate effect, and I thought that that'd be cool, because Deltarune's this low pixel count game. And actually, let me just turn it up a lot. Like it looks nice with the subtle effect, but just to illustrate, let me turn it up a bunch. Yeah, so you can see with the pixelate effect turned on, everything that exists in the scene is being pixelated. So that includes the tension meter. I'm surprised I'm doing so well, barely being able to see. But all the stuff that's on screen space, so like all the UI at the bottom, is not getting pixelated. So that's interesting. That's mildly interesting. Anyway, I considered leaving the pixelate effect on like low, so you would get like a very slight pixely effect, but it's not going to be pixel perfect, because these aren't sprites moving along a pixel grid or anything. They are objects in 3D space moving around, then just getting pixelated by a post-processing filter. So that's really not going to look as good. I decided to just leave it off. There are some cool games though that make good use of that pixelate effect. One of my favorite looking things that I found in Dreams, let me see if I can find it again, is someone recreated the PS1 version of Ridge Racer. Here it is. And it just looks absolutely fantastic. It looks so much. Oh, look at this! Look at this! It looks just like a PS1 game with the like low. They like created like a low res texture effect, and like they made all their models look like they're low poly, even though this game doesn't even have polygons. And it makes excellent use of the pixelate effect. So just put a pixelate effect over the whole thing. Yep, that's what a PS1 game looks like. It's more anti-alias than a real PS1 game would be, but whatever. Anyway, this is utterly fantastic. And the ground has like seams between it, which is obviously just like a mistake. But also, PS1 games kind of look like that sometimes, so it's not entirely inaccurate. And I love this. This is so good. So good. The physics leave something to be desired. Your car seems like it's made out of styrofoam. Anyway, and again, but again though, like this game is not. Stop. This game is not remixable. Like I would love to go in and see like what they had to do to make this, like make the enemy car AI and stuff, but it's not remixable, so I can't. And that's why I'm doing this stream, just to. I hope it's helpful to someone. Again, I'm not a Dreams expert by any stretch of the. Oh, whoops! I clicked on the wrong one. I clicked on the dream when I meant to click on the scene. Of course, silly me. I hope this is helpful for anyone who's because after I did my first Dreams stream, back in the early access, where it was like literally my first exposure to trying to make anything with the tools. And, I spent just hours just fumbling around, failing to make anything reasonable. After that stream, I kind of considered it a failure, honestly, because like I made much less of a thing than I had gone in. I'm just gonna play the game while I'm talking for interesting fact. This game is for PS4, as it says in the headline. There are rumors that it'll be coming to PC, but for now it's just PS4. Of course, that means it'll also be back compat. I think they said they're porting it to PS5, but also it'll be back compat on PS5 natively. Anyway, after my last Dream stream, I was on like the Dreams subreddit, and I saw someone was like asking like, hey, does anyone know of any videos of like someone making an entire dream from start to finish? Because like I'd really like that as like a learning tool or something. And someone linked to my stream, and it's like, okay, I appreciate the views, but like if you're looking to actually learn how to make things in this game, you should not be looking at the stream, where it was literally my first exposure to the tool. I had literally no idea what I was doing. So much of that stream was just me staring blankly at a PS4 for ages. Anyway, this game, it's I think much more competently made. I spent a lot more time on it, and I actually took the time to like look up how to do things, or like I didn't have the pressure of being on stream. It's still not great, obviously, and especially like the layout of the code and stuff. Like later at the end of the stream, I'll show you guys something that Media Molecule made, and you can see like how much better organized their code is than mine. But anyway, hopefully, if there's anyone, hopefully this can be a much better resource. If someone's out there asking that same question, like, hey, is there a video of someone explaining or making a dream from start to finish? Like, hey, can you show me that? Hopefully this will exist as a better reference. Let's see. What else was I gonna talk about? I've talked about just about everything. Like, obviously there's going to be tons of little things that I'm just skipping over, most of which aren't interesting. Again, the stream is published, and it's marked as remixable. So if you have dreams, you can totally go in here and just fuck around with the code. Let's see, what was I going to say? There's not much left, honestly, so I think I might talk about, like, one of the last things I implemented, which was, the little messages in the corner. So he's like, chaos, catch me if you can. And then after a while, after like 10 seconds, it'll change to something else, and it'll play a different voice line. Yeah. So I kind of want to show off that, just because, compared to like everything else, that was just such a simple thing to do. Like that's the sort of thing Dreams is really great at. This is the logic. I tried to like organize this one at least somewhat reasonably, put it on its own logic chip. Cause that's the thing, is you can nest these logic chips, and like you can give them names as well. I didn't give any of my logic chips names, but you can totally name them, and so it's sort of like having name subroutines, that sort of thing. And of course you can use variables, and you can use, there are different ways to do comments. You can have like text boxes that have words, and you can use those as comments. And you can also have nodes, and then you can label your nodes. And then those nodes will show up as like ports on the outer chip, and then they'll be labeled with the name of the node. And so there's actually a surprising number of things you can do to write clean documented code. And of course the other thing you can do, if you don't want literal spaghetti code like this, is if you want to get really anal about it, you can go in and actually tweak your wires and like make these nice, 90-degree bends and stuff. I only did that in a few places where I had like weird crossed wires that were hard to follow. Most of the time though, I just left the spaghetti mess that the game gives you, which I'm okay with. That's what I do when I'm working on real electronics as well. I'm fine following the spaghetti of it all. I think it looks neat. Obviously it's a mess, but I think having all these crisscrossing wires and stuff going just every which way, I think that looks cool. That's neat. And the fact that you can like play the game with all these wires here, or you like can grab a thing and all the wires update in real time. It's not like they disappear or anything. Like, that's super cool. So anyway, this is the logic chip that controls the like little messages that appear in the corner and the associated sound effects, and it's super simple. Basically, I have this timer that's on a 10-second countdown. And when the timer's finished, so the timer goes into the selector, and the selector just has two things. This timer will only ever trigger once. So when the selector starts, it's displaying this message, because this is always the first message that displays. Right. But then when this timer triggers, this selector will go from outputting on A to outputting on B. And then B will enable this timer. And so this timer is set to 10 seconds. And then its timer finish pulse is connected to the reset timer input. So this timer will just go in a loop. So here, that's the fun thing, is you can watch it running. So this timer will go for 10 seconds. And then this selector will switch over, assuming I don't die. Right, and then that will start this timer, which will go for 10 seconds. And then when this timer finishes, it'll restart itself, and that'll go on forever. I died! Oh no! I wasn't watching the actual game, so I died before you got to actually see the timer reset. Anyway, you can imagine what that looks like. But whenever this timer triggers, that makes a bunch of things happen. For one thing, it makes the speed of the game go up slightly. Very slightly. Or it should at least. Why is it set to 0? Maybe I broke that. Maybe the speed doesn't actually go up. Oh wait, no, never mind. That's one of the annoying things about Dreams. Is, right. So all the displayers, all the sliders only go out to 1 decimal point, but if you go into the actual number editor, you can enter more decimal points. So in this case, the speed goes up by 0.04, which then rounds down to 0 on the actual display, which is annoying. They should fix that, honestly. That's not a good feature. Anyway, so it makes the overall speed of the game. So this is just a variable called speed, and I was showing this earlier. It's almost everything in this game that moves I've wired up to that speed control. So like the time between emits, like the speed of the heart, even the speed of the carousel is correlated to the speed variable. But then it also affects this message speed, and it increases that by 0.5, whatever. And so that I think that corresponds to 5 seconds. I don't know why it's 0.5. It's just the way it be. Oh, it's because this is a blend. That's right. Yeah. It's that issue. Where it's being 10 multiplied by this thing. Ugh. I hate that. Oh well, I'm not going to bother going back to fix that now. Anyway, so it increases the time between... It increases the length of the timer every time the timer finishes. You can imagine how that works. And then also, every time the timer finishes, it triggers the randomizer. So it enables the randomizer, and then it also shuffles the randomizer. And the randomizer is set to shuffle. So at the start of the scene, it'll basically choose a set order for its outputs, and then it'll cycle through that order every time you ask it for a new input, or a new output, or whatever. And so then each of those outputs of the randomizer is connected to a sound effect, like this one. And then it's connected to a text box. And these text boxes are text displayers, which have an animation speed option, so it just literally makes the text scroll out like you'd expect. And because they're all wired up to the same randomizer, only ever one of them will be on at a time. And that's like it. That's just how that works. It's so simple to do something like that. Oh, and then all the sounds, I have this is maybe not the best way to do it, but the sound has an is playing field, and so I have all of those wired up to this giant OR gate, and then I knot the output of the OR gate, and I connect that all the way over here to Jevil, just to make it so he doesn't talk over himself, which, isn't great, because you have this, like, another stupid wire running. You have more action at a distance, you have more wires running across the field. Probably the better way to do that, the way the game intends for you to do that, is to use, where is it? Here, an exclusive gate. So an exclusive gate lets you create a gate basically with a name, and then all the gates that share that same name, it'll only let one of them pass a signal through. But then for each individual gate, you can assign it priority. And so that's basically the way you're supposed to make it, so that only one thing happens at a time. But my not gate solution, it works well enough. But then once I wired all this up, I figured out, what else can I do? And specifically because I think it's, this line.
The true one, Neo Chaos. The true one, Neo Chaos.
I was like, what the fuck is he saying there? So I looked it up on the wiki. And apparently he is saying the true and Neo Chaos. And apparently Toby Fox confirmed that in like an SGDQ donation comment or something. He was like, the true and Neo Chaos. So anyway, I was like, it'd be silly if, like, in addition to having like these the voice lines and then like the text lines, if I also had subtitles for the voice lines, because like in your preferences for Dreams, it's somewhere in here. You can turn subtitles on and off, and so if you place subtitles in a Dream, it'll actually respect your subtitle settings, like the user's subtitle settings. And it's like, it's not a necessary thing at all, but just because it's so simple to do, I thought it'd be neat if I just wire up the is playing signal from each of these sound clips to a corresponding subtitle. It's like, I can do anything, metamorphosis, bye bye, and then the true and Neo Chaos, of course. So yeah, that's super simple. And like I was talking earlier with the neat like surround sound effects whenever Jevil spawns, just for fun, I thought it'd be neat if when he says "I can do anything," I don't know if you can tell, but that's playing out of the DualShock speaker. So I'm hoping that's like a fun, surprising thing when you're playing the game. It's like, suddenly he's talking out of the controller. Because it always surprises me whenever my DualShock talks at me, because it happens so infrequently. But I just love that Dreams lets you do that. And like the DualShock speaker is actually surprisingly okay. Like obviously it's not something you'd want to listen to for any extended period of time, but compared to like a Wiimote speaker or something, it sounds pretty good. Oh, and then the last thing is like when you die. Let me just show it real quick in case you've forgotten. It'll take a second. I'm just so good at the game. I just can't die even if I want to. Yeah, see? True and Neo Chaos. Oh yeah, the health turns yellow when you're low in health. I don't think I need to explain how to do that effect. That's pretty simple. So yeah, it says like score save and it's like retry and quit. That's again something that's super easy to do in Dreams. So I have again this variable that's watching when you're dead, and then whenever you die, it starts this timer. And I could have done this on like a timeline or something, but it's such a simple thing. I felt like I might as well just use a timer. So the timer triggers after like 1.6 seconds. And that sends a pulse to this dialogue text displayer, which is like a text displayer, but with slightly more features. I don't know why they're two separate things when they're basically the same thing. But anyway, so that has an animation, but then it also has corresponding dialogue choices. And so we have one that says retry, and then one that says quit. And then that literally just creates these corresponding output wires. And so then the retry wire is wired into the... whoops. Where'd it go? What did I do? I don't know what I did there. That's correspond into the reset scene signal here, and then the quit is wired into this door. And the game doesn't do a great job of explaining this, but doorways are basically ways to connect scenes within a dream. But when you have a dream like this that only has one scene, when you trigger a doorway, it just ends the dream. And so that's how you end a dream. So yeah, that's that. And I think that's just about everything. It's been nearly 2 hours, but I think I've explained just about everything. There aren't too many people watching the stream. I'm hoping, I'm sure I'll get more views in the actual video. But if anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to take them. Otherwise, there are a few other things I want to show off in Dreams outside of the stream I actually made. Oh yeah, I guess I can say, if you'd like to play my Dream, if you own Dreams yourself, you can certainly just pop onto the Dreamiverse and search for Jevil's Survival Nightmare. Last thing I did was come up with a title, and I was like, it's a dream. It's not the full battle. I couldn't just say Jevil Battle, because I didn't want to put in the work of making the entire battle. If someone would like to, again, this is remixable. Feel free to, feel free to work off my spaghetti code. But it's not the battle. It's just like a mini game of sorts. It's a survival game, and it's a dream because it's in dreams. Oh, but it's Jevil. It's chaotic. Maybe I should call it a nightmare. So, That's what I came up with. Anyway, if you would like to play it, you could just search for that in the Dreamiverse. Alternatively, of course, it exists on indreams.me. I thought it like showed you the URL there. I don't know why it's not showing the URL. Maybe if I find it in the actual Dreamiverse? I don't know if that would make a difference. Jevil. There he is. Nope. Okay. Anyway, all that to say, the link to the indreams.me page is in the description for this video. So you can click that, and then you can like queue it up for your. I think you can like click a button and it'll queue up to play on your PS4. I've never actually tried that though. I'm not sure if that works. Oh yeah, and well, I should have looked at that while I was still there. Whoa. I hate scrolling in this menu. It has leaderboards, of course. Leaderboards for time survived and then tension points. So, by all means, try and beat my high scores. That was just like my first attempt, because I've been playing this a lot. Obviously, I'm still not great at it. My one concern is that even with it getting faster, it is a little repetitive. And you know, if you're good enough, you could probably just survive forever. And you'll just get bored of it before you'll get bored of it before you even die and make a leaderboard score. Anyway, there are just a few other things I want to talk about in Dreams, and just like the creation process and stuff. So I was showing, if you were in the stream earlier, I was showing off someone made Tetris in Dreams, and I made like a random walk thing that all works on a grid. And so I was, whoops, no, I didn't actually want to exit. And so I was thinking about like what is the best way to make things that happen on a grid, because like it has this like grid snap thing. So like if I head into the sculpt tool, just like make a cube, you know, you can turn on the grid snap, and like you can change the size of the grid snap, and then you can like move this cube, or you know, you could even make a bunch of cubes and have them all aligned on a grid like this, and there you have all these nice grid cubes. But like if you want to actually move an object using like you know, the standard movement tools like a mover, for example. Hold on, let me turn off the grid snap because that's annoying me. I can like take this mover and put it on this cube, but then even with grid snap on, you know, obviously the grid snap is just a thing in the editor. Like the actual movement is still going to be completely free form, and like, you know, it's the thing where like if I take this cube and I rotate it, I need to turn off the grid snap first. But you know, if I grid snap off and I like rotate this cube even just like very slightly, so it's no longer on the grid, whoops, then you know, it's not going to be on the grid. It's just not grid aligned anymore. So like making games that are grid aligned or that are in a 2D plane, that's definitely a struggle in Dreams, because you have to be like super careful that you keep everything on your grid, and especially if you're making a 2D thing, that if you keep everything on the same plane, that seems tricky. And like they've made some changes. So the puppet controller, I haven't really messed around with puppets too much. That's like their character controller system. But as of the 1.0 release, they do have a 2D puppet option. I haven't really messed around with that to see how that works. But the one thing I was wondering is like if you wanted to make something move around on a grid. And I was experimenting with this last night. You can do some fun things. So let me take this thing. Let me put it back on the grid to start with. Make sure it's on the grid, aligned to the grid perfectly, of course. But then if you take, say, where is it? Here we go. A tag. I take a tag, and I place the tag in the scene, but then I group that tag with the cube. And I scope out, and let me make sure I'm previewing X-ray. So now that tag and this cube are one and the same. But then let me scope back in, take the tag, move it over there. That's another thing, is like groups. Having your groups and your hierarchy of like your parent. If you ever used a game engine like Unity or Godot, you know, the game objects or like the nodes in Godot, they have like a parent-child, this tree hierarchy, basically. And Dreams has the same thing with its group system. But because it doesn't give you like a list of objects in the scene anywhere, it doesn't. I feel like it doesn't do a great job of illustrating the relationships between objects and like what level of nesting you're currently working on. And so sometimes I'll be like working on something and realize, oh shit, I was one level of group out too far, if that makes sense. So, you know, like right now, if I grab this node and I move it around, it moves the whole group around. But if I scope in, now I'm moving just this thing. So you really have to be careful like what level of nesting you're at, because you can have groups within groups. And I believe there used to be a feature in the early access, or maybe it was only ever a dev feature, that actually gave you a list of all the objects in the scene. Because that would be a super helpful thing. And, you know, it'd maybe give you a reason to actually name your objects, and you could, like, see the hierarchies and, like, edit. Because, like, I would have this problem when, like, trying to edit something that's, like, nested 3 levels deep. But because you're working around in this 3D editor, I'd be, like, trying to scope in, but there'd be, like, something in the way, you know, that sort of thing. So, yeah, that would be a nice feature. Anyway, what I was saying is, so now if I take a teleporter, and I take that teleporter and I slap it on the cube. Well, and let me make sure it's actually on the cube. So let me turn off the freaking grid. Oh, I shouldn't have deleted it. I should have just grabbed it. I take the teleporter. Where's the teleporter? I take the teleporter. I slap it on the grid, on the cube. But again, remember, this teleporter is not on the cube now. It's on the group containing the cube and the node and whatever else. But then if I tell the teleporter, hey, every frame, I want you to... Oops, I need to actually name this tag. Oops, that's naming the group. See, again, you have to be at the right scope. Name the tag T, or whatever. And then tell the teleporter to teleport to T every frame. Then what do you expect to happen? Well, exactly what you'd expect. So that's fun. That's fun. And, you know, you can imagine if you, like, take the time to, like, line everything up properly, get everything on the grid properly, then you could get things that actually move along the grid. But see, that's not moving along a grid the way I set it up, because this tag is offset slightly from the center of the cube. So I think I need my grid to be maybe slightly smaller. Oh, yeah, see, now it's going up and to the right. So anyway, that's something you can mess around with. That's just like an idea. I haven't really like made a game or anything around it. And of course, whoops, again, scope in. And you can imagine you have 4 tags in all 4 directions. And then if you want something to move in a cardinal direction on a grid, you can have it literally snap to, you can just have it, you can, you know, wire the teleporter up to a pulse and have it just teleport up once at a time. Anyway. Things like that. That's the sort of thing where it's like, what can you do with this tool set? That's what interests me most about Dreams, is just like pushing it to its limits, doing things that, like, you know, maybe it's not entirely intended for these things to interact in this way, but they totally can, and you can actually make something with that. The other thing I was messing around with, I don't know if I'm gonna bother recreating it, but is if you have like, if you imagine like a horse with a carrot and a stick, you know, you have like an object with like a stick attached to it, and then the stick has, because, you know, Dreams has these like almost rope physics sort of things with these connectors. Whoops, these connectors. So you can have like literally a stick with a string and like a carrot, and then the carrot has a tag attached to it, and then the horse, so to speak, has like a follower. And so it's like literally following the thing around. Just like doing dumb things like that. That's what I love. I love that. Anyway. And then I also, before we go, because I think I've just about wrapped it up. Oh yeah, I was talking about the things I like about Dreams. I was talking about earlier, like Persnickety 5, just making like kind of jokey, kind of slapdash games. Obviously there's going to be the people who put in tons of effort, but, you know, if I was going to put in a ton of effort towards making like a big polished game, or especially, I've seen people complain about people recreating games in Dreams, like what I did here. I just took that fight from Deltarune and I made a Dreams out of it. I've seen people complaining about that and being like, no, Dreams is supposed to be about your creativity. You should be making original games and that sort of thing, and not just copying what other people have done. It's like, I don't agree with that. I think there is an art to trying to copy something, you know, as faithfully as you're, as far, you can go as far as you're willing to go, you know, in terms of copying something faithfully. And especially for, like, thinking myself personally, if I was going to make a completely original game, I'm damn certain going to do that in a real game engine, you know, not in Dreams. So then at the end, I can maybe have something that I can actually share with people who don't have a PS4 and $40, and that I can actually sell or something, you know. Dreams, to me, is not going to be something where I'm going to be making my next blockbuster game or anything. It's the thing to, like, mess around with, being like, what can I push the limits of this engine? It's to, like, make dumb joke things like Persnickety 5, and to be like, hey, if I wanted to try and recreate this thing from Deltarune as accurately as possible, you know, how far can I go with that? That's what Dreams is to me. At least right now, because there are some interesting things from, like, the things Media Molecule has said they're working on, and, like, the things that they're rumored to be working on. So they say the next big thing, they've said, Lord knows when this will actually happen, if it actually happens. They said the next big thing they're going to have in the 1.0 release is VR support. Specifically, VR editing is what excites me the most. Because, like, it's surprisingly intuitive, actually, to be, like, you know, using the gyro controls on the DualShock 4 and, like, going in, like, hooking these wires up and stuff, and, like, grabbing these things and moving them around. But then also for, like, sculpting and stuff, you can use the PlayStation Move controllers, and then you don't just get, you know, X and Y tracking, you also get full 3D position tracking with 2 controllers. And so you can do all sorts of crazy things where you're sculpting in 3D, that sort of thing. And so then imagine just combining that with VR, so you actually have proper depth perception along with tracked motion controllers, and then you're doing the sculpting in VR, but then also, you know, wiring up all these little nodes and stuff, and, like, you know, imagine, like, puppeteering animations in VR by just, like, literally imagine, like, grabbing the little hands of a puppet and moving them around. That sounds cool as shit, and I want that. That just sounds so cool, because back when VR was, like, first kicking off, I saw this tech demo or something from Unity, where it's like, hey, you can use the Unity editor in VR to, like, make levels and stuff. And I think it was kind of like just bare bones thing where you can, like, place objects and, like, manipulate them slightly. But, you know, obviously if you're using a real programming language, like you would be in a real game engine, you know, you're going to want, like, a real IDE, a real monitor, a real keyboard. You don't want to be doing all of that in VR. Like, maybe you'll pop into VR to, like, place objects around and stuff, but, you know, generally speaking, I don't know what, I might have done something bad. I want to just undo as much as possible. Actually, no, I'll just quit without saving. But for Dreams, where it's, like, designed from the ground up to be easy to use with a controller, that just translates really nicely. And I think this is entirely by design. That translates really nicely to being easy to use in VR. My only concern with that, of course, is that PlayStation VR sucks. Like, for the kind of, like, it's fine, you know, the resolution's good enough, the track motion controllers are, like, okay, but for the kind of fiddly, like, those tiny little wires that you'd have to, like, hook up, trying to do that with PlayStation Move controllers, I can imagine being a nightmare. So the rumor, there's a rumor floating around that Sony is going to start publishing some of their games on PC as well. Starting with Horizon Zero Dawn, that was, like, the big rumor. But then the other, you know, the rider attached to that is also that Dreams might be making its way to PC, which would be cool if that also means you could use PC VR, Steam VR, with Dreams. That'd be super cool. And then the other big thing that's supposed to be coming to Dreams, I don't think they've given a timeline for anything, is multiplayer. So right now there's local multiplayer. You can wire up multiple controller sensors and you can make, like, a local multiplayer game. But it's also supposed to have online multiplayer. And actually, coming back full circle, if we pop into one of the first Dreams I made, lag cubes. So this is a Dream that is literally just designed to lag the game by spawning a bunch of objects. But what's interesting about it is the way it lags. Because you can see, obviously, the frame rate's running lower. Normally the game runs at 60 FPS. Here it's running at more like 20. But also you see, as I'm moving the camera around, it's, like, stuttering. It's, like, jumping back So it's not just lagging the way a local game would, it's lagging the way an online multiplayer game would, where it's like you're getting out of sync with the server, and like the client can't keep up with the server, or vice versa. So I don't know for sure. I don't even know if they've said, maybe they've done a GDC talk or something. But I have to imagine that this game is already running on some sort of client server infrastructure, or like architecture, I should say, because obviously, you know, it is just local multiplayer, so the server and the client are both going to be local to the system. But I feel like they've designed it in such a way, they've architected this game in such a way that will make it easy to then make the jump to having a remote server and then multiple clients connecting to it, and then that manifests itself in the game lagging in these weird kind of glitchy ways, which is interesting. That would be very interesting, having online multiplayer. But what really excites me is the idea of multiplayer editing, having two people. Because you know, the Dreams has lots of cool tools for collaboration. So you can publish something to the Dreamiverse, but share it privately with other people, and then you can import elements into scenes, and then scenes into Dreams, and then whenever you update an element, you can then update that element in all the scenes that it appears in. So you could be like, okay, you go make the character, you go make the music, and I'll go make the level design, and then you all come together and like combine the different things you've made into a scene, and then whenever someone updates it, they can just publish a new version, and you update your version with what they have, and then in the end you have a thing that you can just publish. So that's like the current, and then of course there's like a version control system even, like there's a lot going on here. But what excites me is if it had like basically a pair programming sort of thing, where you have two people, particularly if you could have two people online in VR, both working in the editor simultaneously creating dreams together. That would be something kind of unlike anything else. That would be amazing, and I would, you know, try my hardest to convince my friends to go along with me on that, because I would want to spend so much time doing that. That sounds super cool. So, you know, right now I don't have, like, after having made this thing and published it, like, I don't have too much motivation to, like, spend much time making anything substantial in Dreams. Like, maybe I'll make some more dumb things to see, like, what can I do with the editor. But if they added those features, they added, like, VR editing or, like, online multiplayer editing, and especially if they brought that all to PC and it had crossplay with PS4, oh man, this game has so much potential. And, like, you know, maybe it's just the people I follow on Twitter, but I seem to see a lot of people talking about it. But then I also seem to see some stories that maybe Dreams, you know, did not sell as well as maybe they were hoping, which is a little unfortunate, because Dreams is cool as shit. So anyway, as I close out this stream, I just wanted to show off a few things that some other people have made that I think are interesting. So, like, I showed off that Tetris game earlier, but unfortunately that Tetris game wasn't editable. You know, it wasn't remixable, so I couldn't actually look in and see how that was made. But there are some things people have made that are remixable. And so, like, there's this... Oh, small metal bolt has been updated. Good to know. So someone has made a fully functional version of Conway's Game of Life in Dreams. It's obviously on a finite grid. What would interest me would be if someone could make Game of Life on an infinite grid. That'd be cool. I don't think it'd be that hard. So Game of Life is one of those things that's like, you know, maybe you might think this would be hard to make in Dreams because it, you know, it doesn't deal with grids, it doesn't deal with turn-based stuff great. But really, if you think about it, actually, it's not that tricky to make something like Game of Life. Hold on, let me turn on doopity boopity. There we go. Now I can see everything. So basically, you just again, this is something someone else made, to be clear. So you just have this trigger zone. Each of these cells basically just has a trigger zone that is the size of all of its neighbors, and it's set to detect up to 9 things, right? And then it has an output signal that's number detected, and it's set to detect things that are tagged as alive. And so, like, if you know how Game of Life works, like, actually no, as you know, like, I could show you the rest of this logic, but like, just from that, Like that was the missing piece of the puzzle. Is like, how do you make Game of Life in Dreams? Now that you've seen that, you can probably, if you know how Game of Life works, you can probably piece together like the rest of this logic is actually super straightforward. Um, which is neat. That like some things like that are super simple to make. And so like I had a few ideas for like things I could make in Dreams. I don't want to talk about them now just in case I do them. But like arrays, for example. There's totally a community of people. Like there are people making games, and like there are people making animations. But then there are also people making assets. There are people making like music that you can use in your games, or sound effects you can use in your games, or characters you can use in their games. But then there are also people who are making their own custom microchips, their own custom pieces of logic that you can import into your games to use. And so one popular genre for that is arrays, because Dreams, for all the things that it does not have any sort of array system. Like you have variables that can store numbers, and you can have wires, but there are no arrays. And so you can kind of make local variables that can store anything by hooking like a node up to itself, that sort of thing. But there are no arrays. And so if you search array on the Dreamiverse, you can find like all these people who have made different implementations of array systems. Like here's array of 7 values, sort of, or persistent binary array something. This thing I don't think is an array, but it's ridiculous. Hold on, I want to go back to the I want to go to how do you get to the view cover? There we go. This just looks silly. I love this. I have no idea what this is. There's like 100 element persistent array 8x array. This was the one I saw that seems maybe the most fully fleshed out. Hold on, I need to go into the remix. There. So turn on visibility, X-ray. You can see all the different things. So yeah, this thing has like documented code and stuff, and it seems to have like arbitrarily sized, multi-dimensional arrays. It's like this is a 20 by 5 by 2 array, and it's got this read head. So the way arrays are implemented in Dreams is you literally have a physical grid of values. Each of these has like a node connected to itself for like a rudiment, or like 2 nodes connected to each other for like a rudimentary like local variable, because Dreams also doesn't have local variables. You can kind of fake it with this. And then it has like a wireless transmitter and receiver, which has a like a limited range to it, and then you have this read head, this read write head, that when you're reading values from the array, you have this read write head that's literally physically moving around the scene, and reading just like the nearest value from whatever wireless transmitter happens to be nearby. So that's obviously ridiculous. But hey, Dreams doesn't have arrays, but you can still make them. That's neat. And so that's what's got my mind whirring with Dreams. Is like, oh, if you can make arrays, even though it doesn't have them built in, you can make local variables, you can make arrays. What can you do with those? You can have things that move on grids. Like you could make any video game. Basically, at some point you're going to be limited by memory, right? Because it'll only let you spawn in so many objects and so many wires and stuff. But it's pretty generous with its limits, actually. So the potential there, there's definitely a lot of potential there. So anyway, the very last thing I wanted to show you. So I've been showing you like the things I made and the things some other people have made. That I spent like a week working on my thing on and off. I couldn't tell you exactly how many hours I put into it, but the answer is several. And my code was poorly organized, but there was a lot of it, right? Seeing all those wires crisscrossing everywhere is fun. But to close out this stream, I want to show you something that Media Molecule made. The actual creators of the game. So if we go into prizes, so the story mode of Dreams is called Art Stream. and it's made in Dreams itself. They supposedly made the whole thing. It's like this 2 or 3 hour adventure game, and it's also this like genre crossing thing where it's like part platformer, part shooter, part point and click adventure game, and it's actually like really cool. Not just like it's a really cool tech demo, but it's also like actually a pretty legit game in its own right. And it's supposedly, according to Media Molecule, made entirely in Dreams. Like they made the whole thing using PS4s and DualShocks and PlayStation Move controllers, which is honestly insanely impressive because like it's got the polish of like maybe a double A game, you know, like a really polished indie game, maybe. But unfortunately, Art's Dream is not remixable. Like that's the crazy thing to me, is like I want to go in and see how they made every little thing in Art's Dream. Yeah, Little Big Planet. They did a similar thing. All the levels in Little Big Planet are made in Little Big Planet. But you know, in Little Big Planet, the physics engine, you know, like the character controller, movement, that sort of stuff, that you know is made outside. But Dreams, like damn near everything you have to actually make in the game. Anyway, the fact that Art's Dream isn't remixable is just like the most perplexing thing to me. Most of Media Molecule's things aren't actually remixable, but what they do is they'll give you prize bubbles. So, for example, Debug is this little guy is one of the characters you can get. One of the characters you can play it as in Art's Dream, and you can collect a prize bubble that'll then let you place Debug in your own levels. And you know he's this nice little character. He controls like he's like super responsive. Again, in the way a lot of things in Dreams aren't. He's got these nice animations and sound effects and like particle effects and stuff for all these things. He has like a nice jump and double jump. He has this like charge thing that also makes him jump. He has like these rolling ball physics when he's in his little ball form. And then when he's out of the ball form, he's like walking around, and he has like these expressive eyes and stuff. And like he's this super complex, crazy character that they made entirely in Dreams. And it's like, how? How the fuck do you do that? Well, fortunately, since we can look at him in the editor, we can actually take a look. We can take a look inside Debug and see what exactly makes him tick. So you see right off the bat we have these 3 or 4 or 5 or 6. Actually, let me rewind the scene so we don't just have all these things scattered throughout. We have all these chips, 7. Those chips, or what even are these? Oh, no, that's a chip. So each of those chips contains some amount of logic. So, you know, to even begin to understand what we're looking at, we have to open up each of these chips. So let's open up. Whoops, I think I scoped into something. Yeah, this chip is like buried deep somewhere. It's deep within the bowels of Debug. That was the thing I was talking about earlier. It's like hard to tell what level of scope something is at. Anyway, there's some more up here as well. Let's like open this one. And this one, and this one. And okay, whoops, I didn't mean to close those. Okay, and now that we have all these microchips open, we can maybe begin to unravel the logic that makes Debug work, except, oh wait, all of these microchips are actually just made of even more microchips. So if we really want to understand how Debug works, we have to open all of those microchips as well. So let's go ahead and do that. Oh, jeez. And the camera. I'm not great at navigating the camera. I think I should. Yep. There we go. Let's open that one, and 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 that one. Some of them don't even look like microchips because they have custom icons, so you really got to watch out for them. And that one, and that one, and that one, and that one. Okay, and then all of these microchips, not all of them, but most of these are also, well, first we have to position them so we can actually see all of them in space. Because they've all opened up on top of each other. Let's get that one over there. And then that one over there, maybe. And then that one over there. You'll notice the game is upset with us. There are too many wires. There are too many wires. Hold on. There's more. The frame rate's still okay. It struggles sometimes. Some of that's just the capture card being shit. But there are more. There are more. Cause see, this was the first bit. This tall one here has even more microchips inside it. So if we open up each of these microchips as well, yeah, just a few more. Open up that one, and that one, and that one, and that one. There's a few wires in the way. And that one, okay, oh, nope, and that one, and that one. Oh, that's another tall boy. Oh, and then there was another one hiding right here. Okay, so then there's more microchips. The frame rate's starting to get a bit of an issue. But now we can position all these microchips where we can actually see them. So anyway, I don't know entirely what point I'm trying to make here. It's just like, if you want to spend the time, if you're like Media Molecule and it is literally your job, you are paid 6 figures to make things in Dreams. Actually, they're British programmers. They probably don't make 6 figures. I don't know. But yeah, you can, like, if you're worried about like, oh, I'm gonna hit limits of how much logic the game will let me add. This guy is using up about 20% of gameplay memory, 11% of graphics memory. So even with all of this, you could have 5 of him. You could have 5 times this, and you'd still be good. You might not be running at 60 anymore, but hey. And you know, there are more microchips here. But this is probably enough to just illustrate that, good lord, this is ridiculous. Look at this. Look at it all. Look, you can't look at it all. It is physically impossible to encapsulate all of this in your mind. But like the cool thing about it is that, like, you know, it obviously looks like a mess. Like when you lay it all out like this, and like all the wires are crisscrossing everywhere. Oh yeah, now the frame rate's really chugging. It's the PS4 Pro, even then. PS4 Pro running at 720p, and even then, like with all these crisscrossing wires and stuff, and all these things just scattered throughout. Obviously, this looks terrible. But like their code, if you want to call it that, is actually kind of organized and laid out. Like all of their chips are labeled. Like this is the ground impact animation. This is the arm vigor animation. This is the eyes and hands animation. But this is just the eyes animations. You have this little thing that's just like the basic settings that you. Oh, here's another chip that I didn't open. Oh, there we go. So that handles the roll simulation for when he's like in a ball form. Whoops, come back. Oh no, that's not a chip. That's a splitter. And like their nodes, their nodes are labeled. So like this input will be velocity forwards. And like, see, they actually took the time to organize their wires instead of just like letting them go all loosey-goosey like I do. So like, and obviously if you're actually trying to follow this code and figure out how it works, or, you know, work on it, like if you work on Media Molecule, obviously you wouldn't open all of these things at once. You know, each of these chips is basically like a subroutine. Since they actually have a hierarchy of chips on, like, I did that in some places, but for the most part I just put anything wherever. They actually organize things into different chips, and so, you know, you can look at just the part that you're working on. So it's kind of reasonable. Like, when you put it out like this, it's obviously ridiculous and it looks unreasonable, but it's actually... Is this a chip? Oh no, this is a sound... Oh no, that's a chip. There we go. There's the sound effects chip. Oh, whoops. Here, go back. I want just the sound effects chip. The sound effects chip. Oh yeah, and see, that one's got lots of little chips on it as well. So we have the hovering AI, the hovering, double jumps, charge up, ball and roll, movement, vocals, that's its own chip. So you have, whoops, you have all these chips as well. And then, some of these chips are going to have timelines on them, and then timelines also have gadgets on them as well. It's just ridiculous. Dreams is kind of cool, like it puts, obviously it has limits, right? Because here's another chip, and here's another chip. It's just kind of a game because can you find all of the chips? Here's another chip. Keyframe rotation speeds, sure. It's just like a game. Can you find all of the microchips and open all of the microchips? But yeah, like obviously the game has limits. You got these thermometers, like in Little Big Planet, like in any game with a level editor. You have these limits. There's a limit to the number of wires you can have. There's a limit to the number of things you can have, and connectors and unique elements and that sort of thing. Because it's running on a console, right? It has to run on a base PS4 without, thrashing the swap space or whatever, or running at like 1 FPS. So obviously they place limits on you, but the limits, as you can see, are extraordinarily generous. Like, I've definitely seen people in the forums complaining about such and such thing. It's like, oh, I want to place more than 1,000 objects, that sort of thing. But, if you working within the restrictions the game gives you, you can do so much. That's an interesting prospect you mentioned. If you could export these as programs, if it comes to PC, and they actually let you like bundle like a bare bones player with your dream, and then you could like publish dreams to Steam or something. That's maybe like a pipe dream scenario. I sincerely doubt they're going to do anything quite like that. They have talked about being able to export music to like an audio file. Obviously, you can just record the music, with like the record function or something, or a capture card, or even the line out on the controller. Anyway, Dreams is cool as shit. In summary, if you have a PS4, you should 100% buy Dreams. Like, it's incredible. I can't wait. I just want to see where it goes. I want to see what they add to it. I want to see like what new features Media Molecule adds to it. If they port it to PC, if they add VR support, if they add collaborative editing, like real-time collaborative editing. And of course, I just want to see like the crazy things people in the community do. Like, it's compared to what it had in the if you played it in the early access, the live version does have much better browsing tools. Like, it's got these new recommendations for you, and like they have these. Oh yeah, if you wanted to see something that's like photorealistic, this was for their like food themed community jam. And yeah, look at that hot dog. That's a pretty good hot dog. Look at that. You can see my tiny little imp zooming around. And that's made entirely in Dreams. And like it's a 3D thing that you can like walk around in. Oh yeah, you can do like post-processing effects and stuff. Man. It's cool. It's cool. This is very quickly becoming my most played PS4 game, if not for lack of things to play on the PS4. If you like played it in the early access, you get this cool dynamic theme where the shapes will like float in front of your icons. I always like themes that have that depth layer to them. The soundtrack, like Arch Dream, is a pretty cool thing. The soundtrack's pretty good too. Like, it looks pretty. I like their, again, watch the Digital Foundry videos. They really go into depth on like the rendering tech that they use. I love that the default character controller is motion controlled, so you just tilt the controller around and he like does this. So like it's fun going into random people's dreams and just like seeing, did they leave the motion controller enabled for their, it's like for Snickety 5 we were playing earlier. That also has the motion controller enabled, so just anything that's using the default character controller is just gonna have the motion controlled head bobbing, which is pretty great. Hold on, I'm gonna close this out just by playing some Persnickety 5, because Persnickety 5 is great. It's fantastic. You should play my dream. Play my dream. There's a link to the In Dreams page in the description. Yeah, that's about it. Thanks to those of you who came to the stream. I know it's been a while since I made anything on my YouTube channel. And to those of you watching the stream archived, I appreciate you. I know this is not as curated, or I guess maybe how you'd call it, as it's not as authored, right, as a scripted video would be. But I hope it was informative and interesting, especially if you're getting started in Dreams. Again, I am also just getting started in Dreams, so there are many things I don't know. Many things I don't know the best way to do them. I'm sure, in fact, I know a lot of the things I did are definitely not the best ways of doing them. So yeah, making something like this, that's just a 3D platformer with some basic logic and stuff. Well, it's not a great controlling 3D platformer, but hey, Dreams makes that super easy and intuitive. Ah, shit, that platform's so slippery. It's kind of great. I should probably stop this before I get copyright striked for the Persona music. I know Atlas is really particular about I'm terrible at this jump. My friend played this and he made all the jumps on his first try, and I was like, come on. I love that it's just his eyes are glowing. So yeah, Dreams is a cool thing. I kind of want to get... Anyway, he also has... what is the move? Oh yeah, he's a dash move, which is silly. It's definitely not going to help me make this jump, though. Okay, that was just dumb. That was just poor play on my part. This is the only thing is this is the only hard jump in the entire thing. Just because that platform is such a weird angle. Ah, fuck. That didn't count as a checkpoint. Okay, whatever. This has been my dream stream. I hope you all had a good time. I've said this before, that I have a few videos in the pipeline, and then those videos never ended up coming out. But I actually have a script now, and I'm just waiting on something to arrive, let's say. So I have at least one video in the pipeline, and one or two other ideas that I'm considering for things. Surprisingly enough, I've actually seen people commenting on my videos. It's hey, Pie Man, why aren't you making anything? It's I don't know, got work. But yeah, no, I enjoy making things, so I do have some things potentially coming up on my YouTube channel in maybe I'm very slow. I'm very slow to produce content. That should be readily apparent. Oh, there we go. I finally made the stupid jump. Checkpoints are something that are easy to do in Dreams. Obviously, my game doesn't have any. But a 3D platform with checkpoints. That's something that's actually kind of hard to do in a traditional game engine. Whoops, hit the wrong button. But doing it in Dreams is actually pretty easy. Anyway, I've got a few things I'm working on. I want to learn DaVinci Resolve though, because I'm sick and tired of Premiere existing. 2D sprites. This game doesn't really have sprites, so to speak of. That's kind of what I was saying at the beginning, is 2D things, doing 2D things in Dreams. It's very possible. Obviously my game is 2D, but everything wants to be 3D. The physics engine is 3D. Things will try and fall into the third dimension if you're not careful. And with the 1.0 release, they did add a 2D character controller, which should theoretically make it easier to make 2D games if that's what you want to do. I haven't messed around with that at all, really. I just kind of rolled everything by hand for my 2D game. This is very loud. I need to turn it down. So yeah, I mean, obviously you can make 2D things if you want. And yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if they did add explicit 2D tools. Like that's the thing Unity did. It took Unity a while to, like, obviously you could make 2D games in Unity. Like, there's no reason you couldn't. But like the editor was very much designed around 3D editing. But then eventually they released a 2D version of the editor. And so I think it's definitely possible that they'll do something similar with Dreams. Oh, whoops, I forgot. This is like a stealth segment. You have to like, yeah, you have to like jump. I guess you can't jump on the tables. You have to jump across the pizza boxes. Anyway, I should not continue playing Persnickety 5, but I think this game is just like the perfect illustration of like the sort of dumb thing like that's that's like easy enough to do in Dreams, but like hard enough to do in something like Unity, where it's like you wouldn't normally bother. Like if you had a dumb idea for like something like this, you know, you probably wouldn't even bother if Unity was what you had at your disposal, because it's hard to do, you know? But Dreams makes this sort of thing like just easy enough that like I expect to see lots of people making shitpost games like this. not to like, I don't mean that in a mean way at all. Like it's kind of fantastic. And the sound effects. Oh, I love it. I love it so much. I could play this. I could play this game all the way through. I just want to show you this. Oh, that's right. It has this like bug. It has this bug where it like ends before it gets to the good part. I'll just leave it there. Okay, guys. I'll see you at some point in the future. Thanks for sticking around. Goodbye. Oh, and thanks for that one person who gave me 99 euro cents. I really appreciate it. Goodbye.